I'd like to call to order the meeting. If you could all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. By way of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. Attendance, we have all the board members show up, so thank you for coming out on this really nice summer evening. The next portion is really the recognition of guests and scheduled speakers, and Dr. Katona.
Okay, this evening we have one scheduled speaker, Mrs. Melissa Gorla, for school transition update.
Good evening. I'll provide you with a brief update of how we're doing at this point. We've been, over the course of the past month, a fitting farewell for Audubon on Wednesday, June 7th. Former Audubon staff members gathered for breakfast, followed by an assembly program with students to open the Audubon time capsule. Participants were treated to artifacts from 1997 to the 1998 school year as part of that time capsule, and in several lovely renditions of the alma mater. It was great to welcome so many people back to the building. A great time was had by all, and we certainly appreciated the help of Mr. Ryan and Dr. Zerbe afterwards on the recess yard with the students. On Wednesday, June 21st, hundreds of people gathered to tour Audubon one last time, to look at memorabilia, and to sign our dedication wall. I'd like to say thank you to the Methacton administrative team for their assistance with this event. During this event, we had 5 different areas for people to really visit, take pictures, kind of reminisce, look around. It was a really wonderful event. Transition activity-wise, our home and school sponsored Popsicles on the Playground activities have begun. These are designed to be very casual events where students and families can meet one another and play on the playground. So fortunately, I believe we have one going on tonight, so it's nice that there's nice weather for that. Our final newsletter, our e-newsletter, is being prepared to be sent for families. Subsequent information will be sent from elementary schools starting in August, so we'll be transitioning over to families receiving information from their schools. Elementary welcome videos have been posted on the transition webpage. Thank you to Mr. Brad Dale, our technology integrator, for his work on this project and for engaging a variety of students in this process. So I suggest taking a moment to take a look at those videos. The biggest thing we're doing right now is moving. There's a lot of things going on in, out, and all around the district. Mr. Mark Fretz, our facilities director, and his team have been busy since the close of school working the timeline that was established for the movement of items. Last week and this week, that movement is largely the internal moves within buildings. I received a report today that building internal moves are well underway and they are on target to be completed this week. The moving company date is July 10th for the move of boxes associated with Audubon. So progressing along, I think everyone recognizes in this process, this is the piece where everybody has to be most flexible and be constantly looking at how the process is going and what needs are. So we all recognize that as we go through the summer, we'll be constantly monitoring where things are in the district, have things landed where they're supposed to, fixing things that don't, and then making sure that everyone has what they need to start the school year. And that is my update for this month. Any questions I can answer?
Thank you. Appreciate the update. Does anybody have any specific questions for her?
Great,
all right.
Thanks.
Moving right along, let's get into the reports. We have the Finance Committee report. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. The Finance Committee met on June 14th. The meeting was called to order at 6:30 p.m. In attendance were myself, Mr. Winters, and Ms. Hackett. With Dr. Zerbe, Mr. Dorn was absent. First, we reviewed the monthly financial reports, including the list of bills and treasury report. There is one budgetary transfer on the agenda for this evening for reallocation of funds. We also reviewed the expenditure and revenue reports along with the healthcare report. Our agenda was pretty robust again the evening. We had about 9 different discussion topics here. The first one and the longest one was probably about the budget, the 2017-2018 proposed final budget update. The budget did not change much from the prior month in May. Dr. Zerbe did list that the one significant savings did occur when we looked at our district insurance premiums. Those savings resulted in a reduction in expenditures in the budget in the amount of $101,000. There was also a discussion about the $1.9 million that currently is in our budgetary reserve in the PDE document. And the committee did recommend that a resolution be added to this evening's agenda, stating that the $1.9 million could only be used for contract negotiations and/or the facilities master plan. There was also some discussion about the budgetary surplus for the current year. It's currently estimated to be roughly $800,000. We'll know after the year-end financial audit. And there was an update on non-public budget expense. This was added to the budget in the amount of $6,410. The next few things on the agenda for that evening revolved around things that the board has to, as a whole, vote on each resolution yearly. The first one is on the local taxes. There's currently 6 local taxes that are on the agenda for this evening for approval. There are no changes from prior year. Next was the homestead farmstead resolution. The amount for this year's real estate tax reduction is $2,008,489. This resolution is up for a vote this evening. We will also be voting on the district insurance renewals. I mentioned this as part of the budget discussion. And we'll also be voting on the 9 depositories that the district uses for the 2017-2018 school year. There are also no changes to these depositories. We did have a discussion in regards to our fund balance allocation. Our fund balance is currently almost at the 8% max limit. You can't go over 8%. So the committee and administration decided that we would recommend to the full board that any amount in excess of 7% as of June 30th, 2017 to be used for the facilities master plan. This resolution is up for vote this evening. There was a brief discussion about policy number 616, it's payment of bills. This was first reviewed by the policy committee and then recommended for the finance committee as well. We will be making some wording changes to the policy to properly align the policy with current practice and to continue to adhere to state and federal regulations. There was mention of Mr. Bricker, who is here this evening in the audience. He will hopefully be starting by month end once all the forms and clearances are through, and we know that that will be the case. And the last item that was added to the agenda that evening was the Keystone Realty Agreement. Our current agreement with Keystone Realty has expired. The committee discussed the agreement and if it should be renewed. At this time, Dr. Zerbe is going to get more information regarding this agreement and any implications that it may have on current tax appeals and report back to the committee. We then had courtesy of the floor where Mr. Andrews commented on the Keystone Agreement and current legislation, the waste management contract, the 5-year budget slide, the availability of the budget presentation, alert a letter from the township, and why the data portfolio is no longer going to be produced. Mr. Earnshaw commented on why the district should eliminate the per capita tax, and he also commented that the district should stay with the 2.5% tax increase, as lowering it would only lead to higher borrowing. And that ends my report.
All right, thank you. Now onto the Property Committee, Mr. Dorn.
All right, the Property Committee met on the 12th of June. The meeting was called to order at 6:30. All members were present. Several topics on the agenda. The first item was critical issues for the master plan. We discussed the long-term plan. It continues to be developed by Fidavia and our facilities group led by Mark Fretz. They're putting together a more significant plan looking long-term and looking specifically into next year's cycle. And we talked about adding an additional property meeting in July so that we could continue to review the progress of that effort. The second item was an update on the stormwater management work. This work continues to be on schedule. It was scheduled to complete on the 23rd, with the exception of landscaping. The landscaping will be completed in the fall when the planting season is better. The third item was Middle School Drive. We received an estimate of approximately $200,000 to open up Middle School Drive to allow for better bus ingress or egress, more likely. And we're working with the Lower Providence Township to understand the requirements the township may have in addition to what our consultant has provided. Summer project status, there's an attachment to the minutes. Mr. Fretz and Mr. Sakala from Fidevia reviewed the 2017 project list. Many of the projects are underway, or we're awaiting additional proposals. They'll continue to work the list. One item that we did get an update last board meeting on was the windows at Eagleville, and the quote for the windows came in substantially higher than what was in the initial budget, and Mr. Fretz and his team and the Fidevia team will retrench and look at what they'll recommend for this, and we'll talk later with them. It may get tabled for this year. We also heard from Mary Beth Brenham from Gordian, which is part of the Keystone Purchasing Network. It's a buying consortium that can be used by school districts across the Commonwealth to improve their purchasing power, hire pre-screened contractors, and execute on all types of work. Mr. Fretz is in the process of getting some pricing, and he did in fact get some pricing for the windows at Eagleville, and we're still evaluating whether we'll use them in the future. Next item was school transition. We just heard from Ms. Gorlow on that. The work continues to take shape, is in on schedule for a smooth transition. Additional discussions, Dr. Zerbe confirmed that Worcester Township will be voting on the signage ordinance, and their public comment period has concluded, and we should hear more on that sometime by the end of this month. Mr. Sakala from Fidevia was also asked to work with Mr. Fretz to review Worcester Township's request for the Methacton School District to compensate the township for some paving and remediation work on Mill Road. They'll come back to us with a recommendation at a future property meeting. As I said, there was a couple of attachments. Let's see. In addition, Mr. Earnshaw commented on Mill Road. He asked that the attendees also be provided with documents during the meeting so they can follow along. And Mr. Navarrete commented that he'd like to see more justification on the middle school drive. The meeting adjourned at 8:03 p.m.
Thank you, Scott. Moving on now to the Education Committee. Ms. Reese.
We met on June 5th. We had a little bit of a later start due to the special board meeting to approve the business officer. So we started at 6:50. The entire committee was in attendance, Dr. Sosnovic. First on the agenda was the charter school update. 22 students attend the virtual academy. 3 are full-time, 19 are hybrid. Attend in a hybrid form. The outreach efforts last year gained 3 students. Another outreach meeting is planned for July. There are 69 students who attend charter schools outside the district. 40 are cyber students and 20 attend a brick and mortar school. 56 are regular education students and 13 are special education students. Next up was the contingency fund updates. In January 2017, 4 applications were submitted. As of May 25th, the district was reimbursed $150,000, which is the maximum amount allotted. On tonight's agenda, you will see 5 to 8 social studies curriculum for your approval. Mrs. Rickey went over the overview of the professional development schedule for 2017-18. It's still in the works, but the biggest focuses are Math and Focus, Wonders, Algebra, Research Guidelines in STEM, 7th, and continuing the training for the one-on-one initiatives. And there is also the hope of adding a little bit more of mental health training for staff based on the surveys that were given to staff and based on just the needs of the community. My notes are a little out of order here. The new SIS update, July 1, will go live. And and they're still working hard, transitioning from Sapphire to Power School. Initial training had occurred at that point at all levels. And we reviewed the enrollment report as always, 250 kindergarten students as of June 1st, and we did add a summer meeting for August 7th. Courtesy of the floor, Mr. Ryan asked about any concerns with Chromebooks and moving away from Microsoft Office. He also inquired about STEM initiatives, including using those in the community. The meeting was adjourned at 7:55.
Thank you, Andrea. And now on to the Policy Committee, Ms. Aubrey Larson-East.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. The Policy Committee met on June 7th at 6:30. We had all members of our committee in attendance, as well as Dr. Zerby, and Kyle Summers from our Solicitor's Office was there to give us some guidance on a few policies that we had questions about. The bulk of our meeting was spent on policies that had previously been discussed. We'd been working some time on a policy on student surveys. We had concerns about student privacy. Kyle Summers was able to give us some feedback that reassured us that student privacy is being protected in these surveys, and we recommend moving the policy to a first reading. The payment of bills, as we heard earlier, is still on our agenda moving forward. We're awaiting feedback from the Finance Committee now that they are finished with the heavy lifting of the budget work. We had some questions regarding the safety policy and property records policy that were brought to us. We're getting more feedback from members of administration. One of the more significant policies that we've seen in the past year was discussed again that evening and moved to a first read this evening. It's Policy 824 on maintaining professional adult-student boundaries. This is a new policy for us, and it's been in discussion for quite some time. I was able to speak to Dr. Harney before he left, and this was one of the policies that really he felt had a big impact on our district, and he was really happy to see it move forward as he was leaving. So special thanks to him for all the work that he did to get this policy before us. Policies that we had recommended for first discussion, Policy 141 on school-related organizations. The committee decided that we'd like to get feedback from the Methacton Coordinating Council, as their organization is greatly impacted by this policy. Dr. Zerby was reaching out to the Coordinating Council for their feedback and to hopefully invite them to join us at a future committee meeting so that we can have a more productive discussion on how this policy should be shaped moving forward. Another new policy that came to us is a policy on diabetes. This is a recommendation of PSBA. One of our concerns with this policy was the implementation of this policy, specifically the requirements around training of district and non-district personnel. Dr. Zerby was going to determine how we're going to address these concerns and bring it to us at a future meeting. We had several policies that were up for 5-year review with no major hiccups. During courtesy of the floor, we had Miss Mary Hull, who commented on Policy 141, which is the school-related organizations. She said the previous practice for home and school was that the various schools would trade their books as a means of auditing, and this new requirement for the organizations to have an official audit done is relatively new, and it's providing a significant burden for the organizations. The meeting adjourned at 9:04 p.m.
All right, thank you, Kim. And now on to the intermediate unit, Ms. Hackett.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Our last meeting was on May 24th. Our next meeting is tomorrow night. We had several items that we approved. One was the increase to the pre-K counts budget of $340,000. They anticipate having 40 additional pre-K count slots in Montgomery County. Unfortunately, the state evidently determines where the greatest need is, and at this point, they expect it to be in North Penn and the Pottsgrove school districts. So even though we talked about this a couple of years ago, it doesn't look likely that we'll have anything here in Methacton. And there were a few approvals on both revenue and expenses that were in connection with Methacton. One is the Access Program for the period July 1st, 17 to June 30th, 2018, and basically they provide the services for us and collect 9% of whatever we are able to collect from that program. Another program that was approved is the Discovery Education Streaming, also for July 17 to June 18, and Methacton, the cost is $5,088.30. We also had internet services for the period of July 17 to June 18 in the amount of $22,452.48. So those were the items on the agenda that we approved and discussed. The most exciting part of their meeting, of course, is the government affairs update. But of course, it's a month old. We'll get a new report tomorrow night. There was a conversation about first the federal budget and the impact that it could have on some of the medical assistance billings that we do, and the state budget, as well as a couple of bills that are in the state legislature at the moment, including House Bill 1213, which is a big issue and is evidently being discussed on the floor again tomorrow. End of report.
All right, thank you, Brenda. Now on to the North Monco Technical Career Center. I always like the mystery of who's going to give the update. Mr. Roth.
Unfortunately, our meeting was postponed. It was to be held last week, and it was postponed, and the meeting is now rescheduled for tomorrow night. So we have no report.
Thank you. Moving right along. Communications, Ms. Lynch.
I'd just like to share with the board that the Education Foundation for the Methacton community is funding a STEM workshop for teachers this summer. Dr. Colleen Terrell of the University of Pennsylvania will be providing instruction for teachers during a week-long workshop to take place the second week in August here in the district. And teachers will bring an idea that they have for a STEM-related program in their schools, K through 12, and 10 teachers are invited to apply. Dr. Katona will select from those applications, and they'll participate in a workshop that'll be essentially soup to nuts. They'll take their idea to a finalized grant, and then the Education Foundation will review those grants and seek to provide funding for them either within our coffers or by reaching out to local pharmaceuticals or other organizations in our community that look to fund those kinds of opportunities for students.
All right, thank you. Now on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Katona, do you have anything?
The superintendent does not have a report tonight.
The acting superintendent does not have one. All right. Now we'll open it up to public comment on the board action items. Does anybody want to speak relative to the board action items? Yeah. Yeah. And it's important to remember this part's for the board action items themselves, okay? Go ahead, John.
John Andrews, good evening. A few meetings ago, I reminded the board that the first action item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. And I guess people just don't understand that. For instance, with this evening's agenda, the board would make a change from Dr. Zerbe being here to Dr. Katona acting in his place. The major item on tonight's agenda, in my opinion, is the budget. And the budget has certain surpluses due to a 2.5% property tax increase. And I have a list of 8 reasons for why that larger tax increase is not justified. Number one, in the current year, there'd be a surplus of over $1 million if we didn't buy do some advanced purchasing on ELA books. For the coming year, that tax increase would lead to a $1.9 million surplus, admittedly with 0% for labor contracts. Whether or not it's going to be 0% or whatever, I don't know, and maybe that's a totally unsettled thing. And also funding of needed renovations per a slowly developing master plan. The labor contracts, in my opinion, are already generous in salary, perks, and generous, very generous pension. Along these lines, state bond ratings are in decline. We've had a school closing, we've had teachers' layoffs, the renovations are slow to get going, flawed and contentious. I say contentious because somehow we got a quotation of $6,000 a window to fix leaks at Eagleville, and smartly we declined to go forward with that contract. There's been an assessment increase from last year to this year of almost 1%, which automatically provides 1% more property tax revenue. Enrollments are still in decline, with predictions of about 70 less this fall. And seniors on Social Security are in year 3 of no increase because of a low cost of living increase. And why single them out for 2.5% hit when the CPI is appreciably under 2%? So I urge you to cut the tax increase to under 2%, and you can still have a good budget. The other thing is relative to the choice of additional clubs for sponsorship. There are three clubs proposed on the agenda for this evening, and I'd like to know how many points are associated with each of those clubs. I think that's a number that should have been calculated in coming up with that recommendation for those 3 approvals. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana?
Diana Kernop, co-MEA president. I just have a couple questions. On the 7% facilities, or on the 7%, the money in excess of 7%, am I understanding will go to facilities? Did I hear that correctly?
Do you know that?
Yes, that is,
Okay.
if approved this evening,
Okay.
that would be correct.
And once it goes to facilities, does it have to stay in facilities, or can it be moved somewhere else in the budget? Or is it, can you please answer that?
I'm not going to speak for Dr. Zerbe here. It is our belief that it's going to be listed as committed, which would commit it to that. I'm not aware, and unfortunately Dr. Zerbe is not here this evening to verify what would need to happen or if it could be removed from there.
Pardon?
Better ask your attorney. Yeah, well, ask your attorney. He would know.
Can the money be, once the money is committed, does it stay in facilities, or can it then at a later time be moved to another category in the budget?
Submit a question for that, and we'll follow up with Dr. Zerbe when he gets back, please.
Okay. All right. The $1.9 million that you were talking about in the beginning remarks for negotiations or facilities, is that being earmarked by resolution tonight as either for negotiations or facilities, or is it, has it gone to facilities, or what is happening to that money?
Submit it, and we'll review that.
Okay. I noticed that there's as we're shifting personnel and administrative changes, that one person is getting a monthly stipend of $400, and I'm curious if Troy is getting a stipend or a change in salary to move to his new position, or even temporary position.
those are really questions for Dr. Zerby to handle.
Okay,
So submit those, and when he's back, he can address them.
all right. And I was not here last week, so I do apologize. I remember that there was a resolution by the board that there was 0% to be put into the budget for salaries for the varying groups. And yet, it was shared with me that there's a 2.6% in the budget for administrative increases. Is it in fact a 2.6 increase in the budget itself for it? And they're wonderful people, I'm not negating that in any way. Is that part of the budget that is being passed tonight? That was reported out last week?
Yeah. So this has been talked about a couple times. That is part of an existing agreement, so we know that that 2.6% will be in for next year. They have an existing agreement which does not end at the same time as the other 3 labor agreements.
I understand that their existing agreement, and when will they get the 2.6% then? Because their existing agreement ends in September.
This is public comments for us to hear from you.
I'm asking the question based on what was reported, that there's 2.6% increase for the administrators. My question is, are they getting that? I guess I'll phrase the question this way then. Are they getting a 2.6% increase now before their agreement expires in September? And is that in the budget?
Yeah, we're following the contract, so if you want more specific details, then submit the question, and we'll get a response to you on that.
Okay. And the last one, I guess I would say that I very much appreciate the fact that the board is going to act on 3 clubs tonight, Best Buddies being one of them. There are 50 more clubs in the high school alone that are running for free, and I'm hopeful that you will be looking at them as time passes as well. I wanted to clarify, since I know you're going to vote on that, but tied to Best Buddies, there was a comment made and it was published as all the Best Buddy discussion was going on, and I just would like to take a minute to clarify it. There was misunderstanding at some point. MEA did take a strike vote, but at no time did we ever say to anyone, and I would like it on public record to all of you, with any of these clubs running for free or not running for free, that during a work to rule, we would ask them to stop. We have not discussed as MEA work to rule or any such thing, and I wanted to clear that up before the vote was taken. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. Seems like a pretty critical meeting for the superintendent not to be here. His wife surprised him with a vacation, I understand, but it seems like a critical meeting with the budget and stuff for him to be absent. So a lot of questions not getting answered by the guy that was handling the budget, and the budget is a big item. I'd like to address my comments to the budget. During the budget process, taxes were raised 2.5%, and that $1.9 million that was generated was listed as unspecified expenditures. So we just raised taxes 2.5%. We don't know where it's going, but we're just going to put it on the presentation as unspecified expenditures. So that just didn't seem right, that we're raising taxes and we don't even know where the money's going or where it's going on what line item or wherever. So we just raised taxes because we're going to do something with that money later. That was during the budget process. So now we're raising taxes 2.5% for adoption tonight, and I understand that anything over 7% of the fund balance is going to capital improvements. I would think, so now we have that 2.5% increase, the $1.9 million, and we're going to use some for capital improvements, and we're going to use some for negotiations. But now this 7% item comes up, and that's probably $1 million. 1% of $100 million is $1 million. So I don't understand why we don't take that million and give it back to the taxpayers and lower that tax increase. You had the money put aside, the 2.5%, that $1.9 million for capital improvements, and now this other $1 million falls out, for anything in excess of 7%. So give that money back to the community. I mean, you closed the school. that was supported by the community for so many years, so why not let the community share in some kind of reduction in this tax increase? Have a 1% tax increase, and give the $1 million back to the community. I just think that would be the proper thing to do. Thank you. And one other thing, I think, when people stand here, they should get questions answered. This is where they need to get them answered. It kind of had a vibe of years gone by there for a while, but this is where questions should be answered. Questions about the budget, questions about things that are on the agenda. This is where it should be answered. Answered, not submitted on an index card. Thank you.
Any other public comment on the action items? Yeah.
Candy Oliver, Eagleville. When a person stands at the podium and asks about money that's being shifted from one fund to another, and you don't have the answer, Mr. Bartle can answer that. He has answered those questions in the past. You're shifting money. There has to be a legal precedence for that. That's why we pay an attorney. I'm not going to wait for Dr. Zerbe to come back and answer a question that Mr. Bartle is very knowledgeable in answering. And when people stand here and ask a question, we have a right to an answer. You're coming back and telling us that we have to pay a tax increase, whether we want to or not, and not giving us any specifics. So we have a right as taxpayers to get answers to our questions. And I also saw the meeting last week where you discussed Best Buddies. And one of the comments was, the club has to enhance the community. Please explain to me where Best Buddies is not an enhancement to this community, but explain to me how the ski club is. We have 138 clubs in this school district, 44 in the high school, sponsored clubs, at a cost of $228,000. And then you sit here and you tap dance and talk about points, and you have to do this and that to become a sponsored club. And no one in this room last week knew the last time when a club was voted to be sponsored. I know. I was in the room. It was the GAS club. There was no discussion, no club in the room. It was on the agenda. They took a vote. It was approved. End of discussion. No description. There was no talk of policy, procedure, process, points. It was passed. That's some of the history in the school district. But to tap dance around Best Buddies and then to drag your feet about having it at Arcola, a month ago, a special needs man was attacked by 3 boys that were the age 12 to 15, who not only laughed, they videotaped it. Don't you think middle school kids should learn about the children they go to school with and to look out for the special needs kids? Maybe these things wouldn't happen. But Best Buddies in this school district is the only club that is not sponsored. Every other school district in the area sponsors their club. We supposedly have a school newspaper that the sponsor gets over $2,000. Every other surrounding school district's newspapers are online. The last time Methacton's newspaper was online was 2013. So what are we paying for? I can access any other school district, read their school newspapers. 2 of them also have literary magazines. So to backpedal and find excuses not to sponsor a club that's tried for 3 years, and then throw 2 other clubs in the mix that were not discussed last month. It's embarrassing. And I've heard the last month the number of people outside the district commented how this was handled. And last month, the adults in the room that night were the students. And you should be proud that they stood up for their fellow students instead of trying to find a way not to sponsor them. That should be a plus to this school district. But again, when members of the public come up here and question this board, there should be an answer. And if you don't know the answer, you better get one. That's your job. You're accountable to the public.
Thank you. Any other public comments on the action items? Anyone? Okay. Let's move on to the voting. So may I have a motion to approve the board meeting minutes of the work session held on May 17th, 2017, the board meeting held on May 23rd, 2017, and the special meeting held on June 5th? Second? Any comment? All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Now under the fiscal items, Dr. Katona.
Just one order when we get there. I'd like to,
You want to split them out?
well, yeah, I'd like to bring E ahead of.
Oh, we'll talk. Hold on.
Okay, fiscal items, we are looking for approval of the list of bills attached, approval of the treasurer's report attached, and approval of the budgetary transfers attached. Also, final adoption for the general fund budget of the Methacton School District for the 2017-18 fiscal year in the amount of $106,894,058, requiring a millage of 29.4585 and an increase in property tax of 2.5%. Budgetary reserve, approve resolution number 17-04 for use of budgetary reserve funds attached. Taxes for 17-18, approve the per capita tax of $5 for Lower Providence Township and $10 for Worcester Township under the provision of Act 511. Approve the per capita tax of $5 for Lower Providence Township and $5 for Worcester Township under the provision of Act 679. Approve the local services tax of $5 for Lower Providence Township and $10 for Worcester Township under the provision of Act 511. Approve the real estate transfer tax of 0.5% for Lower Providence and Worcester Townships under provision of Act 511. Approve the earned income tax of 0.5% for Lower Providence and Worcester Townships under the provision of Act 511. Approve the amusement tax of 5% for Lower Providence Township and 10% for Worcester Township under the provision of Act 511. Approval of the depositories for the 2017-18 fiscal year, Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Trust, TD Bank, Harleysville Bank and Trust, BNY Mellon Bank, M&T Bank, Pennsylvania School District Liquid Asset Fund, U.S. Bank, Wells Fargo Bank, Tompkins Vist Bank. Insurance carriers and premiums for 2017-18, approve the insurance carriers and premiums for the attached for 2017-18 school year in the total amount of $589,796. This reflects a total decrease of $81,260.70 from 2016-17. Homestead and farmstead exclusion resolution number 17-03 in the amount of $2,008,489.88 for the homestead and farmstead exclusion for 2017-18 attached. Commitment of funds, approve unallocated fund balance ending June 30th, 2017 in excess of 7% of the budget to be committed for use for the facilities master plan. Student settlement agreements, approve the settlement agreement and release for student number 530040368 with special language of the terms of the settlement agreement approved by the district solicitor. Approve the agreement and release for student number 530200206 with special language of the terms of the settlement agreement approved by the district solicitor.
That's a long list. Thank you. Does anybody want to split any of those individual items out for number 9?
I'd like to have or E before D. I'd like to just change the order up a little bit where the reserve would be talked about before the final budget.
Okay. Does anybody want to pull anything up, Scott?
I'd like D to be pulled out separately.
Okay. All right.
Has the motion already been made as to the approval of all? No. So no motion's been made, so you can make the motion the way that you want.
Well,
let's get all the exceptions.
Yeah. I think let's get all the exceptions first to see where we land. Scott would like to pull out the final budget adoption, which
And D, I'm okay with that.
and Anybody else?
If you want, I was going to say, if you want to word it, you can word it that we can pull out D and E separate from everything, and D go first.
You want E first.
Yeah. Any others?
I'd only like to have K pulled out because I haven't, it was not the executive session. I'd like to abstain.
Okay. Okay.
So you want your motion without D, E, and K, is that right?
Yeah, that's, unless anybody else has anything else. All right. So the motion will be,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
could I just make a motion to approve the list of bills, the treasurer's report, budgetary transfers, taxes for 2017 and 18, which is F, depositories for the fiscal year 2017-18, the insurance carriers and premiums for 2017-18, the homestead and farmstead exclusion resolution, the commitment of funds, all under Section 9.
Yep, you got the list. I second it. Any,
I'll second.
second it, go ahead. Any discussion on that one? Okay.
So what are we voting on here?
Everything except D and E.
Everything except D and E.
And K. And
D, E, K.
Yeah.
Okay.
She got them all. Any discussion on that?
Two things, and one, it's not a motion or anything, but one thing I would like us to look at in the future is possibly a legislative committee that some school districts have, and I say that because MCIU has some of it, but when we're talking about finances, there's so much that goes on in Harrisburg, so I just wanted to bring it up that at some point, I'd like the board to discuss in public having a legislative committee. I know we're already spread thin, but we've got to get involved in Harrisburg so that it's not everything's on there. I just wanted to make that comment. And as far as the list of bills, the one bill that's concerning to me, because I would imagine the bill is going to keep getting higher, is the MESPA and MEA negotiations bill for $9,832 for April. So I just I would just like to be made aware at some point of what our May or June bills are going to look like. Thank you.
Any other comment? All right. All those in favor?
Public comment?
We already had public comment on all the individual items.
On your motion?
It's
The motion that you seconded.
it's a motion on a subset of these to vote first. None of the items changed.
Just the order of vote.
Just the order of them, which we pull out things all the time. We didn't change any of our action items. Okay. Do you have any issues with that, Frank? Okay.
No,
All
I
right.
would said so if I had the issue with your comment. You were right.
All right. All those in favor? Thank you. The motion passes. All right. So let's tackle K next. May I have a motion to approve the student settlement agreements as presented? Second. Any comment? All those in favor? Okay. And one abstain? Okay. Now back to the Paul abstained from that, Paul Winters. So we need to document that. He didn't.
I didn't attend the executive session to hear the...
So you're just saying it's not a conflict here?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the other two, why don't we take these individually? May I have a motion to approve Resolution 17-04 for use of budgetary reserve? Second. Public, or board comment? Yeah, Jim.
Yes, I have to agree with Mr. Bickelman. I always had a problem with this. If it's a surplus, we don't have any determination where the money needs to go at this time. It should be given back to the taxpayers. The reason why I want this beforehand is that I would like to amend the motion that this is applied to the 2017-18 budget so we could reduce the tax increase to the public. And that's how I'd like to amend it. And if anybody would want to second that motion to amend it to read that way, I would entertain that. And if not, then we can have a conversation about how this money is going to be divided up, or how we're going to work with this money, the process.
Does anybody want to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion around it? Yeah.
For the past year, we've heard a great deal about the general state of our buildings and our facilities. We have a very lengthy and involved facilities assessment report that over the next 10 years is going to cost us, by some estimates, $100 million. To say that we are not going to take this budgetary reserve and potentially put some of that money towards facilities, I think would be irresponsible. Our only other option, if we don't get this money through taxes, would be making other cuts in our budget or taking out a loan. And I mean, when I'm talking about my personal household finances, borrowing money is a last resort. It's the only way that we're going to be able to put ourselves in a better situation moving forward, is if we take these small chunks and use them towards this bigger issue that we have before us of our facilities and the work that needs to be done to maintain them and to repair things that need to be repaired so that we can keep our schools running the way they should.
And I will add, Kim, and that's why I brought up the legislation. It is not anyone's will that we want to burden taxpayers, but the way that PA funds their schools is through property tax. So yes, I would like to give it back to the taxpayers, but we have things we need to take care of here for educating our students. So that's why I brought up the legislative report, because we are elected officials and we don't always have the time to work on Harrisburg. We need our property tax money, and I apologize to the taxpayers for that, but we do need it.
My one comment is that I know the Finance Committee's been talking about this for some time, and this is what they brought forward, and I support our Finance Committee.
There are two items here. One of them we have already approved, item J, and that is the item that takes the amount of money that will be in the fund balance that we are making committed, which is money that is already in our fund balance, and that is the significant piece of going into this facilities master plan. This item of budgetary reserve is for next year's budget, and it is assumed that between the needs that we have for appropriately settling our union contracts and for addressing with whatever funds that there are out of this amount for facilities, that we would need that for those things. So we're talking about two different categories of item.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, and thank you, Brenda, because I was waiting for someone to realize the fact that what we're talking about is not even related to the one that we pulled out. It's just one of those things, if you're going to vote for something, please make sure that you're looking at the item and you understand what you're voting for. And because we already did approve it, and there's been comments made about it, as I will say that the amount in excess of 7%, there was $1 million number thrown around at this current time, and as was stated at the finance meeting and the work session, it's not believed to be anywhere near $1 million. I think we're at 7.33%, so 0.33% of $100 million, you're looking at maybe, say, $330,000, thereabouts. So you're not talking about $1 million. Just want to clarify that information that's out there. And we've depleted the capital reserve account for a field project which we grossly overspent for. And we have to, in some way, get enough money back to support and pay for the building repairs that we need to do. This $1.9 million that's actually part of the one that Mr. Phillips pulled out, there's been talk that it's for contract or for the buildings. $1.9 million is not even enough if you wanted to put it all towards the buildings for next year's facility spend. It's not enough for 1 year, and we need to do this year in and year out to make up for all of the money that has not been spent on these buildings. Now, keep in mind that we have contracts to settle, and they're not going to be 0%. I haven't seen a 0% contract in Methacton's history, so I'm not going to believe it's going to start now. So the money's going to be split. We're talking $1.9 million, and it's not going to be enough for either. So when we say give money back to the public and back to the taxpayers, I have a tough time with that because we've already overspent in the past, and we're trying to correct things and have a decent and exceptional school district moving forward. And we have to pay our teachers, and we have to fix our buildings, and that's where it stops.
Any other comment?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Scott.
Listen, I don't like the ambiguity. As Mr. Ryan said, I was not at the Finance Committee due to previous commitments the last time around. I don't like the ambiguity that it could be either or. I think that sets the district up for some issues in the long term. I think Mr. Ryan's right. We need to be thinking about our facilities long term. However, with the amount of money that's left over this year, and looking at this surplus for next year, I think there's room to move on this. I don't think it's the full 1.9 million that Mr. Phillips has said, but I do think it's some number less. I'm not so sure we can set that number until we decide on a budget or vote on a budget tonight. So for that reason, I'm not going to support approval of this resolution at this point in time, albeit I think there will be an amended resolution at some point with some dollar amount.
Any other comment? So
the motion, I amended the motion for this money to go towards next year's budget. It's very concerning that there's no specified percentage. So it's irresponsible to sit there and just keep taking money and not have a plan for it. That's just sloppy. It's poor business. And that's why we should give it back. If we're in such dire need, then the superintendent, the business manager, they're going to have to come up with a plan how to fund something down the road. But the tax people for just holding money, I mean, the reason why we have this resolution, we can't put it in the fund balance because we'll be well over our percentage of fund balance. So it's a money grab. And I just think it's irresponsible as the board, considering people are tired of the high taxes. They're tired of getting increases every year. And here's an opportunity that maybe their increase is only going to be about 0.6% this year, rather than 2.5%, for something that, well, it may go here, it may not go there. So anyhow, the motion I have on there is amended, is that the money goes towards the 17-18 budget, and we'll see where it goes.
So This idea of the administration coming up with something to deal with this down the road is precisely the idea, the mentality that has gotten us into this situation with our facilities. We cannot continue to say we're going to deal with this down the road. It's these decisions on an annual basis that will help us to chip away at the problem that's been created over the past however many years. And I would argue that by investing this money in our facilities and in our contract negotiations, we are in a sense giving back to our taxpayers, because our taxpayers live in this community, and the community is what it is in large part because of our schools. By maintaining good schools, we are giving back to the community.
Yeah. From a perspective of, obviously nobody likes to increase taxes. I take offense, honestly, to the term irresponsible. I think it's irresponsible not to look beyond 1 year. I think it's irresponsible not to consider the contracts we need to settle. So this is not just a money grab. This is money that will be needed for next year. We do not have settled contracts. We do not have the exactness on the property, but we do know we have a big property nut in front of us. And I think the principle of actually making a financial decision beyond 1 year is a good way to run a business.
You always forget about me. I'm always on the end. There's a lot of moving parts to this, as we all know. I mean, crafting the budget is no easy task, and quite frankly, this is the first time I've ever seen a budgetary reserve resolution put through. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it. I like to have things allocated correctly. I understand we have contracts to settle, buildings to fix, things like that, so the money should be put in those columns, in those categories. We do have a lot of work to do, and to Kim's point, the schools have got to be in good shape for the community to use them. The schools are not just used to teach our kids. They're used for plays. They're used for performances for the community, the athletics, fields, everything. There is a lot that we have to deal with. The Arcola fields, anybody that's walked those fields knows the condition of those fields. Hasn't even been really addressed yet. So, to Jim's point, I understand where he's coming from with this. I understand where everybody's opinion is on this. And I will reserve my further comments to when we vote on the budget. But as far as this resolution, I cannot support it because I do not agree with the use of it. Thank you.
Let's try to reread the amendment so that it would be, Frank, do you have that, or do you need Jim to?
What was your amendment?
You can clean it up if need be. My amendment was that the 1.9 or the $1,915,904 would be applied to the 2017-18 budget for that fiscal year.
So that the amendment is that the motion be amended to say that dollar amount. Oh, I'm sorry. The motion would be amended to say that the dollar amount mentioned in the motion would be used and applied toward the 2017-18 budget rather than as stated.
Correct.
To one area.
That's the only motion that he's made at this point. is,
For the reduction of our increase. I mean, we have a...
But if it's irresponsible to use this money the way that it's listed here, then it's also irresponsible to just put it back into the budget without a plan.
all right, let me try one more time based upon what was said. That the motion be amended to say that the $1.9 million be used to reduce the overall budget in the 2017-2018 year.
Could I make a suggestion as to what I think is being said? This is an expense category, budgetary reserve. And so if you were going to amend this so that it would be used for the budget, what you would do would be to take it out of expenses and reduce expenses by that amount. It's not a revenue item, it's an expense item. Does it help any?
It's a surplus.
Well, but it's not showing as a surplus, it's showing as an expense item, an unallocated expense item. And so if you reduce the total expenses by that amount, that's what I think you're seeking to do.
Well, however you cut it up, it sounds like we have funds that can go anywhere we want to put them. Well, if we don't need those funds, then we shouldn't tax for those funds. If we have it as a surplus somewhere, then we should put it towards, I mean, the one year, we took money from the fund balance to balance the budget to a 0%, which I didn't agree with. Here's a situation where you have a line item, you're saying there's $1.9 million sitting there that we haven't determined which way it's going to be spent.
It can only be used for two things, just to be clear.
So fix the budget where we don't have to increase taxes by 2.5% because we took that money and carried it through.
I have a question for the solicitor. If we pass this resolution as it's amended, and that changes item D on the agenda, correct? That would necessitate a change there. Would we be putting ourselves in jeopardy? Would we be able to continue to move forward with some sort of a budget? Because my understanding is that we are required by the state to pass a budget by the end of this month.
You're required by the state to pass the budget by the end of this month. It would not put you in legal jeopardy in terms of your ability to then pass your budget. There would be an additional advertising requirement at the end to advertise what you actually did, and that's no problem. Whether it puts you in jeopardy in terms of your finances is really for you to determine.
I'm more worried about whether or not we would be able to have the documentation and the budget itself in a place that it would be able to be approved before June 30th in order to submit it to the state.
Yeah, you would have to, you could approve this if you determined that was appropriate. And we could still have the budget passed. You can modify the budget as you move forward, and your final budget adoption is the next item on the agenda, so to speak. So you can go ahead and do that. Again, whether you want to do that or whether that puts you in a difficult position with respect to the expenses that you have for this year is for you as a board to determine.
I guess what I'm asking is, would we be able to do these calculations sitting here tonight to figure out what the property tax increase should be then if we were to say that this $1.9 million is going back into the budget? Because we'd have to vote on this tonight. So who is going to then calculate what the property tax increase is going to be? We don't currently have a business manager. We don't have our current superintendent sitting here. Who do we have that can do this in order for us to be able to pass a budget?
Yeah, all of those are practical problems, and you're pointing them out, and that is certainly appropriate. We would have to recast the final budget adoption motion to make it clear what is to be required, do our best at an approximate calculation, and pass it to be verified, but we'll put in the actual amount that would be subtracted from that budget and indicate that that would result in a millage of an approximate amount, and what that approximate amount would be, and then we would say that that would be verified actually in the morning when we have somebody that can do that for us. But I mean, it isn't the best way to do things. It's not the way I like to do them. But is it possible to get it done if you want to approve the motion? It is.
And that would pass muster with the state to use approximations?
Well, it would pass muster with the state because we're going to use a definitive number with respect to that which we're going to subtract, and we're then going to say approximately what that is tonight, but the definitive number is what would rule, and then we'll come out with what the actual millage would be. I mean, we're sitting here tonight, it's 29.4585. I don't know that anybody could calculate exactly what that's going to be this evening. We'll do our best for this evening, but we'll tailor it in the morning. But the real number that you would be subtracting would be the 1.9 something, whatever that number is. So we would be definitive with respect to what we were going to subtract. We just wouldn't have the final calculation for tonight. That's as good as I can do in about 30 seconds' notice.
And Frank, don't we have some latitude with approving a budget lower than advertised? Obviously, it's not an increase to the budget. I thought there was some latitude. I seem to remember asking that question to Dave at one point.
Yeah, I don't think you have any problem with respect to the fact that we're approving the budget. I think the question was more to the specificity of the motion and how you do that, and that's how I would do it, Scott. If you have a better way, but that's how I would do it.
I think you're right. I think you approve a hard number, and then you can approximate millage, you can approximate the percentage, and, I mean, that's math.
Right.
All right. Any other comment? Brenda?
Yes, definitely, because we on the Finance Committee have discussed this for quite a long time, and it is very clear that there will need to be increases for our union contracts. There's no doubt about it. And there is also the need to have some money to be put aside for the capital projects. And for that reason, I was supportive of this number. And actually, I was the one who gave Dr. Zerbe grief that resulted in developing this motion, because I wanted it to be exclusively for contract negotiations and facilities, and not able to be used for anything else. That is the sense of this resolution. There are other aspects of the budget that I would talk about, but this particular number, I actually don't have a problem with.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other comment? All right.
I just have one. I mean, I'm wondering whether, I understand why Jim wanted to take this first, but now given that, I wonder if procedurally we ought to deal with the budget number and agree on a budget number and table this until after that discussion.
Well, we can talk about the budget number under that section and prove it there. I mean,
Well, gentlemen, if I may, you have a motion and you have an amendment on the floor. If you want to get rid of the amendment without having it have any effect, then you vote down the amendment.
I don't want to get rid of it, but I just think sequentially you might have to have a budget discussion. So if we have to vote on it, then we have to vote on it. Well, that's why I said table it.
Well, no, until it passes.
All right. All those in favor of the amended motion? All those opposed? No, the motion doesn't pass.
Can we, because it's not unanimous, you need to have some sort of a roll call, or just mention who it is that voted in favor of.
Let's just do roll call. Andrea? Not in favor. Okay. Brenda? Opposed?
Opposed.
Scott?
Opposed.
Favor?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Opposed. Okay. Thank you.
And yours?
Now, and I'm opposed. Next, we'll go back to the original motion
Was that 8 to 1?
It was 8 to 1, yes.
Thank you.
1 to 8.
Depending on which side of the table you sit on, John. So do I have to do a motion for that one?
Now you're back to the main motion.
Okay. All right, so may I have a motion to approve Resolution 1704 for use of budgetary reserve? Second? Any discussion on that one?
Sure.
Motion be read, it's short.
Yeah, we already read that. Go ahead.
So how are we going to determine where the money's going to go to? First off, considering that we're in the middle of a negotiation, to put a motion like this out there isn't too smart. It's like playing cards and letting everybody see your cards while you're playing poker. I mean, that's my first comment to this motion. I'm just blown away by the fact that someone would produce such a motion. But with that being said, where's the money going to go? How much is going to be allocated where? Since the cat's out of the bag, and apparently we have this much money, what's our intentions with it? That's what I'd like to know. We have a number, we have 2 different items. How are we going to weigh which item gets, we have buildings that need repair, why don't we just put all this right into the buildings? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out the methodology of coming up with this motion or this resolution and how the money's going to be used.
I think because we are in the midst of contract negotiations, it would be premature to try to determine exactly how this money is going to be split. We don't know, and I don't think there's any harm in saying that we don't know. We haven't settled our contracts. I think that's public knowledge, and so that's all there is. It's either going to contracts or it's going to facilities.
So we have 3 different contracts out there, and one group says they want this much, and another group says they want this much, and there's nothing left at the end of the day, and you have a couple groups that are upset because they didn't get a piece of the pie. And talk about negotiating in bad faith. I mean, the fact that the district is putting something out here publicly that has to do anything with money and contracts and where it's going to potentially go. I mean, no offense to any of the unions or the different groups, but, I just don't understand how you publicly discuss numbers when you're in the midst of this. I mean, I just don't get it.
Okay.
The budget is a matter of public record. I mean, it's public information any way you look at it. And honestly, if you feel this strongly about the contract negotiations, I think that you should have gotten involved with them then.
Let's not go down there, please, folks. Can we stay on
If you want to go down those roads, I mean, if you don't understand having a pile of money there and you're trying to negotiate to buy something lower, that guy's going to want that money out of your hand.
Hey, Jim, can we stay on the subject, please? I'd appreciate that.
And as far as my involvement, one thing I've learned is it doesn't do much good because you guys just keep going down the same bad path.
Any other comments on the motion? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That's everybody. So Herb, Jim, and Scott opposed. The motion passes 6-3. Thank you. All right, on to 9D, the final budget adoption. May I have a motion to approve the final budget for 2017-18? Second, discussion? Do we want to start? You want to start at your end, Herb, this time?
Gee, thanks.
Well, I know you feel isolated down there. I'm trying to give you the love.
First, I want to thank the Finance Committee for their hard work on this. Putting a budget together is not easy, having done it several times, having been on the Finance Committee myself. As I specified before, I'm not in favor of the $1.9 million, which is pretty obvious. I didn't vote for it, that resolution. I believe that the money should be allocated specifically. And to Jim's point, that's what I was going at as well. I don't believe that you should just have it hanging out there. We're saying, okay, here's the 1.9 mil we got, and we have 4 things we need to put it to, but we don't know how much we're putting into each one. So granted, one part of one of the 4 groups is going to want the whole thing. So anyway, that aside, as far as the budget, I've also expressed that I believe that given the excess fund balance dollars, given the fact that we will have a surplus of anywhere between $300,000 to $800,000, it seems like there's a number that's floating around somewhere in around there. We do have some reduction in staffing. Prime example, Dr. Harney leaving. You have clubs. This is also a thing that's, well, I want to be delicate about it. I also want to be firm about it, too, because that's part of the reason why we're here, is to be responsible with the taxpayer dollars. We have clubs out there, it appears, that may not be doing much of anything and are sponsored. At least I got that feeling from some of the presentations. If that's the case, that's money that's not being spent wisely, whereas you could have had clubs like, Best Buddies being sponsored all along, and maybe not have a club that's not running right now, not doing much of anything. So to me, the whole club system needs a thorough review, and I'm sure administration and the high school principal will go over that in the coming days. At least I'd like to see that. Given the reduction in cost discovered in the past 30 days, the $80,000 from the insurance premium reduction, that all points to a budget that I don't think we need to go to 2.5 with. Yes, I know we have buildings that need to be fixed. I'm well aware of that. I've read through that huge tree that sits on my desk at home of the facility study, but that's not going to get fixed in one budget. Granted, yes, you have to plan in every budget for that, okay? So where's the happy medium? Some people say do a 1% budget. We've already said we're capping at 2.5. I'd like to see something go down a little bit. I think we can find $500,000 to $600,000 in this budget easy and give the taxpayers a little bit of a break, to Mr. Bickleman's point. And maybe hit that 1.9 or 2%. And I kind of been alluding to that all along this process. But I think that, the budget is a little heavy, and I really don't want to support this one. Thank you.
Okay, I'd mentioned one comment before, a couple of just points, and I'm sure they'll be sound-bited perfectly. But the short-term view, this is not a short-term view budget. This is a view that in the transparency, I know that the word loves you love that word, Jim. From that perspective, we went through this process from a perspective of showing throughout the process where we were in the budget. So it's not like this $1.9 million came out of today on June 27th. It's been evolving over time. It is in a finance committee meetings. It's a public session. The evaluation of where we were in the budget throughout the process has been out there, has been at work sessions. From the principle of cash or credit, yes, it is the taxpayers' cash. I understand that. But at the end of the day, I think the taxpayers would prefer to pay cash than to pay interest on things that we know that we need to spend money on related to the facilities. We will need to have to borrow some money in the near term. The budget includes that to a certain point, and that certain point is probably not enough. So this is an aspect of looking at it from that longer-term perspective. The other part is, I think the word to me that always comes into play in this, that we always have to think about, is balance. These are not easy decisions. We all know, all 9 of us know these aren't easy decisions from a balance perspective. But the balance part that always seems to get, it's either seems to be education or dollars, taxpayer dollars. There is the appreciation of property that's also part of this equation. If our schools cannot maintain, at least at the level they are at, from a perspective, down the road, the $35 or the $135 or the $335 additional tax will pale in the equation to your depreciation on your house that is no longer a preferred school district. So all 3 elements of those are, in my mind, part of the thought process. So I will be supporting this budget.
I know that this budget has been a long time coming. I know that I've shared a lot of my feelings about this budget already. I really appreciate all of the work of the Finance Committee, Mr. Ryan, and your work as the head of the Finance Committee. I know that you have lost many hours of sleep over this budget, and I appreciate it. Yes, we've had reductions in personnel, we've had reductions in facilities, but we've taken some of those reductions and turned them into new opportunities in the district. I'm impressed with the way that we are reallocating some of those expenses to the point that this 2.5% could be lower. I can't argue it one way or another, but I do know that this 2.5%, according to our budget report, for the average district family is going to increase their tax bill for the year less than $130. It's a little over $10 a month. To me, that's a small price to pay for guaranteeing the future of our schools and for making a commitment to keeping Methacton great and doing what we can to strengthen our schools and keep them strong going forward.
No comment this time.
Well, I'm going to go right in order. First off, I personally selected the Finance Committee because I thought all 4 of the people would do an exceptional job with us. And the first year budget, they had to figure out how to come off a 0% increase. That I'm not saying was the right or wrong decision at the time, but that's the challenging year to follow up. Then they came into this year and they've actually reduced the increase by 0.5%. So as opposed to taking the maximum amount that we could, and some school districts do, they worked very hard to get it down to Act 1. Along with that, I'd like to thank the administration and the entire school board for working on reducing our expenses. It was a lot of work on everybody's part to try to reduce expenses and make a smooth transition of closing an elementary school that we don't need anymore because of our declining enrollment. So everybody at this table and other people in the room and elsewhere worked very hard to help support this budget by making that transition well. I'd also like to thank everybody for their work on the SRO program, where we had a lot of good discussion as a group to reduce that spend by over $100,000. We'll continue every year. I hope everybody continues to work very hard to figure out ways to reduce our budget, because if you look at it as a per student perspective, it tends to be high. So the 106 number, there's room for improvement on that. So I'd like to thank the Finance Committee and everybody else involved in getting us to the point where we're not raising the taxes to the maximum amount, and I'll be supporting this budget. Thanks.
Okay, just from my perspective, and I am on the Finance Committee, we did put a lot of hours into this. However, I would say in the last 30 days or so, and there were different things happening along the line, a lot of transparency around our cost per student, which really measures the efficiency of our delivery of education, is really not that good, which tells me, compared to other districts, there's fat in the number. I think many people have eloquently stated that we need to spend money on our facilities. They're in disrepair. However, I don't think one budget will ever solve that number. It is not going to be $100 million because we already closed one school. It might end up in the $55 to $60 million number over some period of time, and no budget's going to cover that nut. It might reduce it just a little bit, but it's not going to cover it, as we work through the index. I do think because of the efficiency issues and our cost per student, that there is money that is not necessarily spent each year, and we see that result with what the surplus has been this year and last year. And for that reason, I think the number of the increase needs to come down to some extent. I would personally challenge the district to fund any teacher salary increases out of efficiency versus out of tax money. And that makes the teachers and the administration have to work together to become a much more efficient school district at a cost per student that is similar to other districts that surround us. I won't be supporting this budget as stated, and I think we need to amend or have an amended motion that is some number less than this, but I'll reserve that comment until we work through the rest of the board members.
I said quite a bit last time, so I'll try to keep this short. To Paul's point before, and it's a point that I've tried to say quite a few times in the past, is the idea that we do have the facilities that we do have to spend money on. And it's been talked about in Finance Committee that we're targeting about a $7.5 million borrowing for the next few years. And that targeted borrowing, as we pointed out during the one work session during the Finance Committee, will be done in much the same way that the district has had to finance things recently, where they put no principal payments up front, and it's all interest loaded, and we just keep wrapping it around and wrapping it around. If we know we have this much money to spend on things, we have to, to Mr. Dorn's point, we have to try to chip away. Because if we're not going to make the effort to chip away at our debt schedule and the way that we've done things in the past, all it's going to do is just make things continually get worse. It's not going to stay the same. We're going to get worse. We're pushing debt out 10 years now. The field project, we didn't pay a single thing of principal for 10 years because that's how much debt we have right now. So to support a budget with a $1.9 million and a 2.5% tax increase, we do need it. It was mentioned, I don't do this lightly. I pay the same taxes. I know that there's seniors out there on fixed incomes. No one wants to raise taxes. But if we want to continue with the tradition that is Methacton, we have to be willing to put the money in to fix prior mistakes. And we got to chip away, and it is going to be a long game. Mr. Winters brought it up. This is not a one-year type budget. We have to keep this mindset year in and year out to fix the problems that we have financially. That's all I have. Thank you.
I too have a problem with the level of the budget. One of the items that is in our analysis is a comparison of several school districts and the cost per student. And Methacton, in this particular comparison, was at $20,333. There was one district that was higher than that, about $500 higher than that, but they have full-day kindergarten, and we don't. And that certainly makes up for the difference. This budget at 2.5% increase would change our cost per student to $22,058 per student. There are private schools in the area that charge far less than that, that are very good private schools where children could go for far less. I looked at some of the numbers of our tax increases. In the last 2 years, our millage with this proposed budget would increase 5.6%, and our actual tax collections on real estate will be 7.3% in 2 years. That's a tremendous amount of an increase that's coming into the district. Add to that the fact that for the last 4 years, we've had a surplus every single year, and that goes to the budget and how the budget is developed, and that there is plenty of room for movement. I added up several items, including changes in salaries that will be reductions for us. Unfortunately, we're without some people at this point, which makes life very difficult, but it will save us a little bit of money. There are other areas that could be saved, such as the $200,000, the other $200,000 in the budgetary reserve. And I think that we could do with a 2% tax increase this year and still be able to keep the money set aside that we have already set aside, the money put aside for the capital or facilities master plan, which we did from the fund balance excess. And so I would recommend that we reduce it to a 2% increase. I won't make that motion at this point because I'm not the last one to speak.
This always confuses me a little bit because I'm part of policy, part of VOTAC and Education Committee, and I should probably attend the Finance Committee meetings, but I tend to say that's the one I'm going to stay away from because we have very capable people on this board. But I'm amazed, and I appreciate all the hard work of the committee, but I'm always amazed when I get here and the members of the committee change things. I am for this budget. I'll cut to the chase. I sat at a board meeting last night, so I want to thank all of you here, those who agree, those who disagree, the members of the public who call us on the carpet and make us think and ask good questions, because I sat at a board meeting last night. It was over already. It started at 7:30 and it was over. They passed a 0% with zero discussion. Nobody in the public, nobody up at the board had one comment about it. I can tell you that school district has higher class sizes. That school district has limited technology. I personally would not live there. It's a lovely place, I'm sure. I personally would not. We have 4,000 students we are committed to. They are the future of this country. And I'm not going to haggle over 0.5%. Could we be more efficient? Maybe. We're working on it. We made a very tough decision to be more efficient. But we have an obligation, and when we signed on to be school board members, the first obligation says education. Are we elected by the public? Sure. And that's why we're not raising taxes 10% or 9%, or, we tried our best. So I beg any of you sitting here to please remember what matters.
Any more public comment on the motion? Or any more board comment on the motion?
I would like to offer an amendment to change the percentage of increase to 2%.
I'll second. Is there a second? Do we need any more discussion on that, or did everybody's discussion take care of that? Herb, you want to?
Yeah, just a quick thing. And based on that motion, Brenda, being on the Finance Committee, and also Scott and Michael as well, and the whole committee for that matter, what is the thoughts on this? I'd like to hear from the Finance Committee on this, because basically you're talking about $600,000 to $700,000, maybe not quite $7. And, that doesn't seem, when you're looking at a $100 million budget, and given the, expense cuts that we've had with the $80,000 right off the bat in premium shares, I'd like to hear some thoughts on that from the Finance Committee. I know we've talked about this extensively, but could we possibly do this at 2%?
Welcome to any ideas. It's great to talk about round numbers without specifics, about specifically if you were going to take away baseball, band, Best Buddies. Specifically, what are you choosing not to do and not talk around generalities? I have no problem. Let's have a discussion about getting rid of baseball, no offense, Paul. I'm not saying that. I'm just using an example, so hopefully that doesn't reverberate across Methacton. It was just an example. My point is, we are making choices not around generalities, but on specifics, and specifics about what you want to get rid of. So I welcome any discussion around it.
Okay, then let's discuss it. I'm not talking about getting rid of it. I'm talking about trimming the fat out of the budget that we already know exists. Okay? And, you're talking about, I have a document here that was presented on 6/20. Okay? But it doesn't seem to show exactly where all these excesses are going. I mean, you show them going into fund balance, and we already said, okay, well, we're going to take money out of the fund balance so it doesn't go above 7%. I understand that. But, if you look at this budget, the projected budget shortfall doesn't hit until 2021, and that's with a $60,000, shortfall. Now, you as well as I know that we will have more than $60,000 in a surplus, given the track record of this school district having a surplus every single year. And there's money out there. There's money in these budgets, okay? There's ways that you can do this. Maybe sticking at 2.5 is the best thing, but right now I'm just looking at this and I'm saying that's a lot of money. Especially if we may have to, hit the full budget amounts in the next few years when we don't know exactly what is down the pike for us. Well, I mean, we don't even know how the state's final budget's going to be. And I'll get back on my soapbox with this, too. Here we are, our school district, approving our budget before the state has approved theirs. Bass backwards. I've said it every year for 7 years. So here's year number 8. Okay? So, I mean, I'm not talking about cutting anything, Paul. I am talking about cutting any programs. I'm talking about cutting the fat. Now, that may require some programs to be cut that are not being fully utilized within the district. Okay? And, I think it's quite irresponsible to actually point out some major things like, a baseball team with a marching band who won a grand championship earlier this year, and also the baseball team who has proven that they, with a gorgeous stadium out there donated by a very generous taxpayer. But I think that if you look at the budget and you look at the dollars and cents and start really delving into the line items of these budgets, you'll see that there's money in there. And I'm talking going down into each building, going within each building. And yes, it has been done before, and it should be done again.
I will Herb, to add to your point, I remember sitting here at this exact time last year, maybe a few months before, and one of the budget items, like talk about small items, don't quote the number, it might have been that each building, they wanted to decrease each budget building, when you talk about line items, by $5,000. And I said, I need to know what that means. And they said, oh, it's up to the administrator. I said, well, what does $5,000 away from that budget mean? And nobody could give the answer, or they didn't know the specifics, so we took that off. So I do think this is, excuse me?
Didn't want to give the answer.
Well, okay. But so we took that off. So I just, I don't think it's fair to bring, it sounded a little bit like you were being unfair to Paul, and he was just using that as an example.
I retract. I want to just be on the record.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
I think it was known in spirit of what it was meant for.
Right, and I get your point to where you have to cut something. Well, cut the things that aren't being used. And, don't, go into there and, well,
So Erwin, I just want to point out one thing, and this is not a reflection, this is just fact. So the projected PSERS from the final budget of 2018 retirement is 13.8 approximately. I'm not going to go to the last decimal here. Just the 13.8 approximately to 16.7, close to $3 million in the next 5 years related to PSERS in itself. That, and in today's world, is a fixed cost that we know about coming forward.
So I have a problem with this process, and it's the same process that we went through last June. And the process is this. Starting in January, we get an approved preliminary budget from our Finance Committee. And from January until now, the Finance Committee spends hours in meeting, not to mention the time that they spend individually outside of meeting, researching, thinking, considering, exploring options on how they can address this budget. The time to bring up issues of trimming the fat to get down by 0.5% is not at the 11th hour. It is not now, it's not here, it's not tonight. These are the conversations that should have been had over the past 5 months as we've been discussing this budget. This is not the time to start quibbling over what amounts to, I don't know, $30 a household? I mean, the amount of money that we're talking about at this point to hold up our budget, to keep people here tonight, it just strikes me as ridiculous, and to me, I question the motive of even having this conversation at this point in the budget process.
Well, I can tell you that we've had many, many budget conversations like this over the years, and this is nothing new. I mean, if you actually came to this meeting saying, "Oh, we're going to do a full up and down vote on this budget," you're crazy. And every single year, correct me if I'm wrong, Candy, we always go through this stuff. We talk about this budget ad nauseum, and usually it's always done at this day, the night of the budget.
But just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean it's the right way to do it.
Well, I agree with you. But you know what? I've also been talking about this budget as well, and I've not always in public either. I would talk to a member of the Finance Committee. I would say, "Look, what about this? Do we really have to do?" I mean, there's always ways of talking about this, and I'm sorry. I will stand where I believe, and I know that there's money in this budget to get it down below 2%. Even, I mean, if you want to stick it at 2, that's fine. And I'm not being irresponsible. We fiscally need the money. We need a tax increase, okay? And I understand that, and in future years, we're going to probably have to hit the 2.5. We may even have to take some exceptions to balance because of the PSERS increase, because of the pensions to the school teachers, okay? And all the public state employees. But for right now, we have an opportunity. That's all I'm saying.
Let's go down the line. Jim, you got any comment?
Well, I'll make a few, but if you go back to our slides on the budget presentation, you look at the expenditure summary on 21, and it's broken up into 3 sections. So the salary and benefits were at 66.14% of our budget, which, based on that resolution, we're going to possibly throw another $1.9 million into that, almost 2% of our total budget. But if you go down to the top 10 list, which is on 26, where do you cut from that without affecting programs, student life? I mean, the problem here is when you're that lopsided with salary and benefits in the district, and you keep increasing that, and the only thing we talk about is cutting whether it's what we're going to spend on the buildings, what we're going to spend on books, what we're going to spend on programs, which if we eliminate programs, that directly affects the kids. Yeah, it reduces the budget a small amount, But we never talk about how to handle the salary and benefits. That's the largest part of our budget. And until that's addressed, I mean, you look at what PESR's done to us. I mean, it takes money from the district and the people year after year. And it's going to get to the point where if it's not taken care of at the state level, somebody's filing bankruptcy, whether it's the state, whether it's school districts. But far as, you know, a couple of people mentioned, you know, it's not that much money increase, and all we are is a big giant credit card to the public, and the interest compounds. And, you know, right now we're at basically 29.5 mils, which is probably about, what, $2,900 per 100,000 in assessed value. But if you're raising that $100 a year, well, that in 3 years, that's $300 a year more. Then you're putting another year of $100. Now that's $400 more than what you're paying. So it's like a credit card. It never comes down. And there was times where I talked to people in the Norristown School District where these older gentlemen in their 70s, 80s bought their houses in the 50s. They paid $10,000 for it. And they did everything right. They kept their checkbook right, their retirement right, and here they are today, and their tax bills is more than what they paid for the house. So, you know, sitting there saying, being in real estate, I will say, people come to this district and they go to Wissahickon, they go to other districts because our tax rate is too high. I see it firsthand. So, you know, put your head in the sand. People won't come here also because of the tax level that we're getting hammered. Look at Cheltenham School District. You can buy mansions down there, but the taxes, you can buy them for $300 grand, but the taxes are $20 grand a year. So, you know, it's easy to say, you know, it's only $100 here, $100 there, but it eventually eats you out of the house. And back 10 years ago, when I started getting involved, I think the budget was around $60,000. And here we are, 10 years later. You know, we're working on doubling the budget. So, you know, until you realize what's driving our costs, and if you want to take care of the buildings and programs, you got to start measuring how to do the attack, going after the things that are really costing a lot of money, and how you're going to handle it. And, you know, it is what it is now, but eventually it'll stop.
Just real quick. So I just want to make sure from a perspective of the choices that I'm making around that budget, around some of the things that Mr. Phillips said. So one of them, there's choices around class size. So we made a decision on changing from 5 elementaries to 4, consolidating. And one of the drivers was making sure that the class size at the lower grades stayed at a similar level. That's one of the things I'm investing in as a taxpayer, as a school board member. I'm investing in that because I believe from my core that the class size in the elementary class needs to at least remain to where it currently is for the Methacton at the lower grade levels. So that is a conscious decision of me of making a choice between expense and education. I just want to be on the record for that. Thank you.
One thing about class size, you know, I'm not an advocate of large class size. The way I look at education, very simply, is like a triangle where you have 3 strong points, And you have a student on one side, you have a teacher on the other, and an environment in which the student learns. If you have any of those three sides that are bad, the triangle collapses. So if you have a teacher that's willing to teach and a student willing to learn, and you have an environment in which it might be a tree that the kid can learn under that's not a hostile environment, the child will learn. Nowhere in that triangle says you have to throw money at that to make that work. And the reason why I can say that, I know teachers that don't work in public school system that get paid a heck of a lot less, that teach because of the love of teaching and the kids. So when you start throwing money in here in the pocketbook, and everybody sits there and says, well, it's all about the kids. But right now, it's all about the pocketbook. So classroom size, I'd rather have 18, 15 students to a classroom. But you have to, we're in a situation where you have to have a budget that you have to stop somewhere. And if you can't fix the budget by reducing that cost and keeping the same number of teachers so you can have 15 students, then you have to start making classroom sizes bigger so you can eliminate positions. And I don't want to eliminate positions, but that's why I'd rather negotiate a good contract to keep the status quo.
I respect that you don't want to, and I don't want to either. I'm just saying I'm consciously, from my perspective, making a decision based on that. I am not ready. I think there was a message at a finance committee where we had a really good discussion about debt. And the discussion ended up being about, well, what are you going to do down the road? And I think the quote was, Band-Aid it together like everybody else. I'm not ready to sign up to Band-Aid it together like everybody else. So from a conscious decision I'm making to not move Methacton into that Band-Aid situation in 2018.
All right, I'm going to go next. So,
Is there public discussion on the amendment?
let me finish my comments and then we'll address that, John. Nobody wants me to speak, apparently. So, to a certain extent, I agree with everybody who's spoken so far. The way I look at it differently is we're already doing a lot of the cost reduction that we're talking about. You know, Herb mentioned FAT. We took a huge risk at trying to close our Audubon because it didn't go well the first time and we were all nervous about trying to do that again. And we worked very hard to try to make that as open so that the public would understand what we were doing and the reasons for it. And we recognized that we need to do that because, to a certain extent, that was fat. We didn't need that building. We had facilities for whoever's estimates, you believe 6,000 or 6,500, and our declining student population. So we're working on trimming fat, whether it's that or adjusting the SRO program, where, by the way, we ended up with retired police officers who have more years experience than the previous police officers while saving money there. And we continue to do things, and we've done staff reduction for next year, right? We've eliminated some positions. So the notion of, you know, are there too many employees that are translating into, and that's the number I calculated, Brenda, roughly about 22,000 next year on a 106 budget with about 4,800 students. So, you know, we've started that process of trying to be more efficient from a staffing perspective, and that will continue on for the years out. If we see opportunities to do that appropriately without impacting education, then, you know, as good stewards of the budget and our community and our school district, we need to continue to do that. So I agree with everybody's comments to a certain extent, but I would argue the point that we're already doing all those things. Some might think we aren't doing it quick enough, and But my point is, we're doing it, and we'll continue to work on that. And always keeping in mind that, our top responsibility is the education of the kids. And sometimes we'll have to err on the side of education, and sometimes we'll have to err on the side of reductions. So from my perspective, I relied on the Finance Committee to present us, the larger board, with the appropriate amount, and, we've had Act 1 for a long time, and there's been a lot of good discussions in the various committees and at the general meetings. So I think we're heading in the right direction. Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Chris. As I stated earlier, we've got an efficiency issue in this district. I think Brenda pointed out, Chris just mentioned it as well, from a cost perspective. And without getting on top of that efficiency, which ties a lot of things in, it's administration, it's the overall cost of our salaries and benefits, it's the ability to do things with transportation or to do things with schedules, et cetera, that in some cases we're handcuffed on. If we can't tackle that efficiency issue, then raising taxes to pay for an inefficient operation is something we should not do. I've been a part of this budget discussion from the beginning. Dave owns the process to update the Finance Committee throughout a period of time until we decide to bring it to the board for a vote in May, which we always seem to get backed into a corner on. We always come down to the last minute, and it's got to go because it's got to be advertised. We've got to give a 30-day notice, and I find ourselves in that situation last year and this year. I think Brenda's proposal makes some sense because I think it allows us to maintain some funds for the buildings that we need. I think it allows some for teachers' contracts, but I also think that the teachers' contracts need to be worked in that in some areas that allow us to gain the efficiencies that we lack. And that's a challenge to the administration, that's a challenge to our staff as well, that we've got to get that under control. It's one of the highest in the area, and with this increase, it surpasses Wissahickon. So we've got to get it down. Neighboring schools like North Penn, like Perkiomen Valley, like Souderton, who just had an increase, so this is not reflective of that, are all substantially greater than 10% lower than Methacton from a cost per student perspective. So we've got a problem. And until we deal with that problem, we're not going to have the numbers correct. And in that sense, I think, Herb, you're correct. There's fat in the budget. There's things that can be done structurally that will allow us to get a number that's in check with other neighboring districts. I support Brenda's amended motion for 2%. We didn't second that, I don't think. We're just commenting, or did we second it? Okay. So I'll pass it on to Mike. These are tough decisions, and unfortunately it does come down to the end because today is when it really impacts the taxpayer. This is the vote that impacts the taxpayer. This is when we say it's approved. So it is important to have these discussions because now is when we're saying yes or no.
I'll keep it quick. I said most of my piece before. I actually do take a little bit of offense to the trim the fat that we all know is there comment. I don't believe that. I think this process has shown that we are making the cuts as Chris brought. To just blanketly say that we trim the fat that's already there, I just have an issue with that. And there was talk about, we always have surpluses. So this came up in a Finance Committee meeting, and I just did a little bit of research here to see the surpluses. And it's interesting that it's true. For most of the years, we have had surpluses, especially in the year we sold the buses, $2.4 million, which shows up as a surplus. But going back over the last 7 years, which is the audited statements that we have on our website, You know the one area which is substantially underspent in every year to get those surpluses? Operation and plant and services, our facilities. Isn't that how we got here? You can go back for the last 7 years, we've underspent by over $600,000 in that one area alone. And Dr. Zerbe in the last Finance Committee meeting brought up this year's current surplus. And it's $800,000, like I mentioned in my report. And the question is, well, how are we at $800,000 if we're getting closer to having a more accurate budget? And it's because of a freeze on spending. So I asked the question of where is the freeze on spending? Operation and plant maintenance. It's $800,000 again. The board, to my knowledge, and I've been at every one of these meetings, has never authorized the stopping of spending in that area. So my question was, don't do it. We authorized the budget. We authorized you to spend in this area. So that's going to be something that's going to come up in future finance meetings. But to talk about a surplus as if it's just all this money, that's how they're getting there. And I agree that you want to make sure that you don't want to wind up, in the red where you spent more money in the year than you needed to. But that's how we're getting here. That's how we're getting these surpluses. Do we really want to see the stopping of spending on these facilities when we're talking about trying to invest? So I fully support the 2.5%. And it's briefly been brought up with the contract negotiations. We can't talk specifics. But as a board, we have executive sessions that deal with these things, and you work through issues. And that's how we come to do it, right? MBA has the option of being able to speak in public and doing it that way. But I will say I have an issue if we have executive sessions behind the scenes where we discuss matters and you support something behind the scenes and then you go against the budget that would pay for that. Makes no sense to me. If you're going to support doing something one way and then to come out and vote against the way that you would have funded it, just makes no sense to me. Thank you.
So, yes, we have had surpluses the last 4 years. This year, it would be about $1.3 million, except for the fact that we advanced spending on a big buy that we have, which is for the future. And we did have almost $2.4 million surplus in 2015, of which about $1.4 million related to the buses. And so there was still additional money. Came from strange places. And the other 2 years, there were surpluses of $300,000 and $200,000. So one of the reasons why a tax increase and keeping tax increases as tight as you can is for the good of the taxpayers, many of whom are in situations where their taxes are so high that they really can't sell their houses. Take a look at Worcester properties that have been sold in the last 6 months and see how many $500,000 houses or more than $500,000 houses have sold, compared to neighboring townships where the taxes are lower. It is a real burden for sellers of real estate. There are a couple of particular areas that I think will generate a surplus next year if we continue with the 2.5%. One of them is, again, this year, we are not recognizing that there are going to be new properties that are going to come online. We should get at least $150,000 additional revenue from those properties. One of them is a new property at Shenandoah, which is going to come online a month earlier than the one came online last year. And the other is that little complex that is happening on Trooper Road. So there will be additional tax revenues that we have not included in the budget. In the last year, the increase in assessed value across the district was 1.7%. In previous years, it had been less than 0.5%. And in this coming year, we are projecting less than 1%, or 0.1%. So there's no reason to assume that our projections for revenues are optimistic in any way. In addition, the budgetary reserve account, which has been used very little in the last several years, that's $200,000. And we do have a little bit of savings, about $100,000 in certain administrative positions that will be partially filled or not completely filled in the coming year. As well as a couple of items, the transition moving, which I assume is going to be in this year as opposed to next year, and some other things that probably are included in next year's budget as a little bit of a cost savings. There is money there, and it's not in programs, and it's not in salaries, teacher salaries, staff salaries, any of those salaries. It's in the construction of the budget, and it can be cut back. And if we make the point that we want to be as tight as we can for the benefit both of the district and the taxpayers, then there will be a different mindset in how things are approached. And I think that that would be helpful for the district as a whole going forward, so that we can stem the tide of these increases that wind up in surpluses, that wind up in us having a very nice, cushy fund balance.
I'll be brief. I'm in support of the original 2.5. I will not read the whole article, but Scott and Brenda brought up a lot about Wissahick, and I'm reading from the June 13th Times-Herald. They go on and on about personnel costs, on and on about capital expenses, and they go on and on to say they raised taxes 3.46%.
That's what the heck.
Scott and Brenda, excuse me, sir.
They still have a lower unit price.
Yeah.
Their millage is their millage is low. It is listed here. I just didn't, yes, you're absolutely right. It's one of the lowest. You're absolutely right.
Before we close out, the one thing I wanted to add, that the budget excess this year is a bit of an anomaly, because this is a year where we went quite a long time without a business finance manager. So there are things that they didn't spend this year because they didn't have the appropriate staff to track it as well as they would. That will come back into next year's budget, some of it. Maybe not all of it, but I think we need to recognize that the administration was shorthanded with a very important position for most of the year, and given that, they tighten the belts appropriately. So I appreciate them not overspending and putting us in the red, but I think this year's budget surplus is a bit of an anomaly and not a trend. And with our new finance manager, business manager coming in, who's going to be here for a long time and do a wonderful job, we can take a sharper pencil to all those individual items.
Absolutely.
I like to be optimistic, okay?
Chris, I also wanted to close out my thoughts on this, because, Michael brought up a good point about the operations and maintenance of plant services, and just to pointing out that compared to the 2016 budget to 2017, the 2017 budget increases that specific line item over about $700,000, and then when you bump into the 2018 budget, that's a little over $1 million. So that money has been put in there appropriately. So, but if you delve into each one of the line items of that, you have to look in there and question as to why some of the things go up as much as they do, and that's the point I'm making. When a line item goes up, 28, or it goes up $100,000 from this year, what's that for? What are we doing with that? And you start adding up all these things, and that's the points of the quote-unquote fat that I'm talking about. Maybe some of it is justified. It's something that we're going to do because, yes, we're going to replace this on this, okay? But the problem I have is it's running throughout the budget on all different things, and that's what I'm talking about. And to your point, Krista, sharpening the pencils, that's where this goes. You're really delving into these items, and that's where we have to really challenge the administration and also change the mindset of how this public education budget is run. Thanks.
All right. Yes, we're going to vote on the amendment.
Public comment?
not an amendment.
You're not required to have the public comment. You've already given notice
Yeah.
of the final budget adoption, and any motion that amends that or anything else, public already has had an opportunity.
Okay.
You can, but you're not required.
Okay, so the solicitor says we are not required. Would the board like to have public comment on that? Okay, limited public comment, let's go for it.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. The board has had excellent discussion over the last half hour or so, or over this budget item. And unfortunately, it's at the last minute, or the last moment, because July 1 comes up this Saturday. There have been a number of cuts in the budget over the months. Several directors have pointed out inefficiencies, you've got, seemingly you've got 5 directors versus 4 directors. And I always come back to thinking about the Iroquois tribes. They would discuss and discuss and discuss until they would get to a unanimous decision in their annual get-togethers. I think there were 12 tribes. I think it's clear to me that 2.5% is the index number. So I think there should be some compromise here to satisfy Ms. Hackett's amended tax increase of 2%, and that still gives money for maneuvering around among contract negotiations and building renovations. No matter what, if we go to $5 to $10 million of renovation work in the summer of 2018, there's still going to be borrowing. So I think that the public can be respected fairly with a 2% tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Brian?
Brian Earnshaw, Lower Providence. A lot of comments, a lot of great discussion, and I appreciate that. Just one question regarding this amended motion that was made by Ms. Hackett and seconded by Mr. Dorn. And it seemed to be supported by Mr. Roth. What is the basis for the 2% as opposed to 1.9, 2.1, 1.2? As I thought.
I just would say, and it's an approximation of costs that I have in my mind that we could take out. And I think you heard several of those items listed by people, including salaries and other things. So
you want to reduce?
It's the same as the index. You know, we build a budget to the 2.5 versus a zero budget.
Well, in my view, there's a basis for the 2.5. One is the index, and 2, you've got $50 million potentially of capital spending that's coming that you either finance through public sources with a 2.5% tax increase, or you borrow. The district has $70 million in debt right now. We spend 10% of our budget servicing that debt. Doesn't go to educating one child. It's servicing debt. And if you're going to arbitrarily reduce a tax increase to 2%, you're basically just adding onto that debt load to fund your capital spending. Mr. Ryan shakes head, Mr. Dorn, no, you're both on the Finance Committee. So the 2% seems arbitrary, and I'm also amazed that this is coming up tonight. Dr. Zerbe has done a tremendous job in improving the budget process this year by tracking changes, presenting every Finance Committee. He started back in, November, December. And it's been a tremendous improvement with the work of the committee and the administration. So for this to be brought up 3 or 4 days before a budget is due, when 2 members of the Finance Committee have been involved in this process throughout, and every board member had an opportunity to attend those meetings, it just seems kind of incredible. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Candy?
Candy Alabama, Ingleville. As someone who's been in this room for 11 budget votes, and for people to talk about our debt, one of our main debts is Skyview, which the public thought it was a great idea, and now that we're on the hook for it because our enrollment's dropping, we've got a problem with our debt. We also have a debt because we have a turf project. $5.5 million was borrowed for a $4.5 million project. And I think the budget said at last count it was $8.4 million and counting. $8.4 million could have went towards fixing up the buildings. Now, 6 years ago, Mr. Ryan mentioned 6 years ago, I was in this room 6 years ago. There was 2 people in this room when there was a budget vote. Last year, I think there was 4. This is the first time I've seen a full room on the night you vote on a budget. To make a comment that what's an extra $30, I'll tell you what an extra $30 is. That's my medication. Unfortunately, I no longer have health insurance. Now anybody feel sorry for me? I'm working on that. But I have to pay out of pocket for my taxes. My home's paid for, free and clear. My husband's family's been paying taxes in this district since they started taxing people. But to discount 70% of the people in this district that don't have children here, and their thoughts on it, or the senior citizens, and be told, well, we paid for your kids. No, sorry, no. Most of the people in this district did not pay for my children. They've been out of school a long time. I have never had a problem with paying for education. I have spoke out against the tax increase every year. I have watched money be flushed down the toilet in this school district. And to sit here and say, well, it's for the students. Yeah, we don't get rid of baseball. We have a brand new baseball field that we got for free. That was free. We should utilize it. But we have incurred debt for the last 11 years, and no one from the public spoke out against it. They were in favor of it, and now that we're on the hook paying back for it and have to raise our taxes, everyone has an issue. I spoke out against Skyview. I spoke out against the Turf Project because of the finances. Yeah, I did pay attention sitting in the audience. And now I hear, well, you know, it's for the students. You know, we want to keep our classrooms small. At the rate we're going, you don't have to worry about it. We're losing kids. I think October 1st our enrollment was 4846, and June 1st it was 4813. I know 3 families that will be out of this district by August. They're not waiting for a tax increase. They can't afford it. And they didn't want to leave Methacton. But this is what you have to worry about. You need to read the sheriff's sales every month in the Times-Herald. We've been bleeding families for the last 10 years. But you keep coming back to the ones who stay and say we need more money. Tighten your belts. I mean, the comment was made tonight, you need to know where the money's going. I need to know where the money is going in my household. The school district needs to know where their money's going. It can't be a mystery. Because if you don't know where our money's going, don't ask us for a tax increase. You have to be accountable for every single penny in this school district. And to come back and say, well, we need a 2.5%, go to 2%. I'm disappointed it took till tonight to have this discussion. Like Mrs. Larceny stated, We should have had this discussion for the last 5 months and in depth at work sessions, but we didn't. But you need to stop telling the public we need to suck it up, because at some point we can't do it anymore. And trust me, if I could have sold my home and got a decent price, or at least what it was worth, I'd have been out of here years ago. But my property value hasn't increased, but my taxes have increased. And you seem to forget our county taxes increased this year. So Lower Providence residents and Worcester residents got an increase in county taxes and school taxes. Our townships were nice and didn't give us tax increases, but it didn't make any difference. So it's great, it's for the students, I'm for looking out for the students and the best education, but you're supposed to be putting the taxpayers first, because we're footing the bill. And I think at some point, school budgets need to go up for a vote for the public to vote on them, and let it be a public decision like they do in New Jersey. And we'll see how fast you'll tighten your belts.
Thank you. Yep.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I think the current real estate taxes in the budget for next year, I don't know if it's $71 million or $72 million, somewhere around there. So 1% reduction is $720,000, a 0.5% reduction is $360,000. So you have to find $360,000 to come down to 2%. So right now you have $2.1 million in your budgetary reserve. I can't wait to see somebody at the state open that document and say, hey, Methacton's gone from $200,000 to $2.1 million in their budgetary reserve. What's up? So that's what somebody's going to say at the state. But you have $2.1 million in budgetary reserve. Lower it to $1.7 million, and there's your money that you need to come to 2.5%. And then put the $1.5 million in transfer to capital reserve, so it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb to the state in budgetary reserve. The other thing I have is, we closed the school, but we hired a K through 12 counselor for $115,000, and the board supported that. But there was no need for that until we closed the school, and I don't know who was on the low end of that seniority in the guidance offices, but somebody got their job saved because there was a need for a K through 12 counselor for $115,000 salaries and benefits. The other thing, Mr. Winters talked about the PSERS going up $3 million in the next 5 years, but it would only be $1.5 million on the backs of the taxpayers. So instead of a $600,000 increase for 5 years, it would be $300,000 increase, which is a little more palpable from what we had in years gone by. In the preliminary budget, Dr. Zerby came forth with an increase to medical insurance, which was like 6% he had in the budget for in the preliminary budget. He has 6% increase. And if you have like a $12 million expenditure for that for the year, that's like $720,000 he had in the preliminary budget, when he knew it was 0.9%. He knew the increase, the projected increase, was 0.9%, but he still had $720,000 in there. He justified it by saying it might go up in years ahead. So, so you look like you come down $720,000 from the preliminary budget when it shouldn't have been in there to begin with. The $81,000 in insurance savings, that's coming probably, I think, from workman's comp claims that have gone down, probably because we outsourced the bus drivers, where probably the majority of workman's comp claims were. So the bus drivers is the gift that keeps on giving. Every year there's a nut that we need to come up with. We laid off the lunch ladies, we laid off the bus drivers, we closed the building. There might be a future sale of the building and the property in the future. Another big nut, we might close another building because we should have 6,500 kids this year based on the projections of, having Skyview. And hopefully somebody yelped that company that gave us that projection of $6,500 because they saddled us with $30 million or $40 million in debt. It was ridiculous. So, and then the other thing is about the tax bills. It's June 28th. Hopefully the tax bills get printed and dated and out in the mail by July 1st, because it's a 60-day discount period and everything like that goes along with it. So hopefully if they don't get printed by, July 2nd, July 3rd, that's going to extend the discount date and everything. So it shouldn't be August 31st for a discount date. So, but I think you can find that money in the budgetary reserve that you have there in 2.1 million and, knock 400,000 off of it to come down to 2% anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? All right. All those in favor of the amended motion? Should we read the motion?
I think the amendment was to reduce the increase 0%.
So put on the mic here. So the amended motion, I'll read it, just double check me. Approve the general fund budget of the Methacton School District for the 2017-2018 fiscal year in the amounts to be adjusted of 1.6 and 2.49, but really the an increase of property tax of 2% instead of the 4. All those in favor of the amended motion? Those opposed? Okay, the motion fails.
Who voted in favor of the motion?
Brenda? No, in favor. In favor of the motion was, we opposed. Brenda, Scott, and Herb were in favor of it.
So it went down 6-3.
It went down 6-3. Okay. Back to the original motion. Okay. Approve the general budget of the Methacton School District for the 2017-2018 fiscal year in the amount of $106,894,058, requiring a millage of 29.458 and an increase in property tax of 2.5%.
And that was 29.4585.
Thank you. All those in favor? We already made the motion, right?
Yeah.
And we already made the motion, we had the discussion, and then after the discussion, you amended, Brenda, right? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion passes 5-4, with those in favor being Andrea, Mike, myself, Kim, and Paul. Okay. Hopefully we got through the toughest part of this. Now let's go on to personnel items, and from now on, in the absence of Dr. Harney moving on, Dr. Sosnovic will be temporarily leading up the HR department, so welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight we have for your consideration 2 resignations professional, 1 resignation classified, 6 employment summer temporary, 1 change of status administrative, 1 change of status professional, 2 compensated leave professional development, 3 uncompensated leave professional. Underneath supplemental contracts, we're asking you to approve the attached list of the extended season pay, and in addition to the additional supplemental contract listed there. We're asking you to approve the attached list for the ESY program, the attached list for the pre-kinder Jumpstart program. Please note that this is funded by Title I. Asking for approval of the ESY Summer Enrichment Program. This is funded by Title III. Approval of the classified substitute list and the list of volunteers.
And the community education, right? There's none? Okay. Does anybody want to pull any of those out? It's a long list.
You know what? I would like to pull out just 1 resignation, A1. And I'll explain as to why.
Okay. All right, we'll pull that out, and then we'll do that separately, and then you can comment when we do a motion on that, Herb, okay?
Chris,
Yeah.
could I also ask that we, where is it, pull out the summer temporary, F, item F.
Where is it? All of F?
Well, I just have a question about it, so.
Okay. So 10A1 and 10F. So I will amend the motion. So may I have a motion to approve the personnel items excluding 10A1 and 10F? Second. Any discussion on those? Okay, all those in favor? Motion passes. Now let's go back to 10A1, which is, try to get myself caught up here. Here we go. May I have a motion to accept the resignation of Darcy Lockman, music instructor at Arcola Intermediate School, effective June 12, 2007? Second. Discussion. Herb?
Thank you. I'm sad to see Darcy go, Miss Lockman go. She was a wonderful music instructor at the teacher. She had done a lot of work with the kids throughout the entire music program through several schools. She was at Arcola, she was at Skyview. I mean, she helped out with the marching band on her own time. She did a lot of stuff, even with the choral. I mean, the work that the choruses did, I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, it was wonderful. And I don't want to accept her resignation only because of denial. And she is now teaching overseas. So I wish her the best of luck on public record, because she was an asset to the district. And now she's an asset to another school somewhere overseas. I can't remember if it was Korea or something, or I don't remember exactly where she is. But when I heard that she was going to be leaving, I knew that, and when talking with her, that the passion she had, and I thought she had a great opportunity to do it. So that's why I wanted to pull that one out. Thank you.
Well, thank you for calling that out. It's always good to hear about the good Methacton team members and what wonderful success they have. Any other comment on that one? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 8-1 with a very, very nice message from Herb on his vote against it. All right, let's move on to 10F. So may I have a motion to approve all the temporary summer employments as listed? Second. Discussion. Brenda?
I just had a question as to why all of them are $9.50 an hour and one person is at $9.85 an hour for the same position?
The way the pay rate structure is for the summer help, in year one, they are paid $9.50 an hour. If they come back and work with us year 2 plus, they get $9.85 for that year 2 and 3.
Thank you.
I was thinking to myself, if only Brenda could eyeball that one standout along that long list. And Troy, you had an answer on your first night. Good job.
I anticipated Brenda's question.
You worked with her long enough that you know she's going to pick up on that one thing. All right, that's good. Anticipation. Any other comments on that one? All right. All those in favor of approving? Motion passes 9-0. Thank you. So now we're on to your day job, curriculum and programs.
Thank you. This evening, under curriculum and programs, we're looking for approval of the renewal of the 6 supplemental contracts for K-4 math grade level liaisons. It would be $437.25 each for a total of $2623.50. for grades K through 4 through next year. Also, we're seeking approval for implementing K-5 ELA grade level liaisons. This would be 7 supplemental contracts in the amount of $437.25 each, for a total of $3,060.75, effective the 2017-18 school year. We're seeking your approval on the Memorandum of Understanding between Montgomery County Community College and Methacton High School to offer dual enrollment credit program according to the defined terms and conditions. Seeking approval for the attached social studies curriculum for grades 5 through 8. This curriculum was last revised in the summer of 2012. And we're seeking your approval for the 3 Methacton High School clubs, the establishment of Academic Decathlon as a district-sponsor club, the establishment of Teams Test of Engineering, Aptitude, Mathematics, and Science as a district-sponsored club, and the establishment of Best Buddies as a district-sponsored club, all effective 2017-18.
Thank you. Does anybody want to pull out any of these individually?
Yes, if we could pull out E, please.
Okay. Any others? Okay. So may I have a motion to approve items 11A through 11D? Second. Any comments on those? Okay. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. May I have a motion to approve the high school clubs as stated? Second. Discussion. Andrea, why don't you lead it off?
We had a lengthy but still not finished conversation last week at the work session, and public comment brought up some things last week as well as today, and I know Mr. Speedwack's in the audience. I'm happy to approve these clubs, and we've discussed at length why there's been a freeze 9 years ago, et cetera, that you explained last week. What's the timeline for fixing the other, for reviewing the other? I don't know if we got a timeline for that.
I don't think we have a timeline right now.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Any other public comment or board comment? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. And through the Best Buddies discussion, I learned that my daughter Suzanne in 7th grade was in Best Buddies this year, so that was good. The next item is the policy. Dr. Katona.
Okay, on the agenda this evening are the policies for first read. There are 9 policies listed here. And you also have the policies for second read, which will be policy 701, facilities planning, 708, use of equipment, 710, use of facilities by staff, 711, energy management, 715, use of fax machines, and 916, school volunteers.
All right. May I have a motion to approve the second reading of the board policies? Second. Any discussion?
I just wanted to reiterate Kim's comment on her minutes. This committee is very tedious, and Mike and Kim are simply incredible at going over these policies. And I did want to thank Dr. Harney and all the teachers involved in Policy 824, because it was a tricky policy, and a lot of time and effort went into that. So I did want to reiterate Kim's minutes.
All right, thank you. And I find it interesting we have a policy on fax machines still.
That was discussed.
Can anybody find one in the school district? Okay, then we need a policy. All those in favor? Motion passes. Gifts and donations.
Under gifts and donations this evening, we're seeking your approval for accepting a gift of a bell kit, bracket, and mallets from an anonymous donor for Skyview Upper Elementary School. Value is $100. Trips, approve a trip for Methacton High School's Habitat for Humanity to buildon.org conference at Roosevelt University in Chicago on July 26th through July 28th at no cost to the district. Authorize the administration to work with Pennsylvania Youth Survey Project to administer the 2017 PAYS survey to students in grades 6, 8, 10, and 12 at no cost to the district. Bucks and Montgomery County Schools Healthcare Consortium appoint Mr. Timothy Bricker to serve as management trustee for the Bucks and Montgomery County Schools Healthcare Consortium effective July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2019.
Anybody want to pull any of those out? Okay. May I have a motion to accept all the gifts and approve the Methacton Habitat for Humanity trip and the PACE survey to students in grades 6, 8, 10, 12, and the appointment of Mr. Timothy Bricker to serve as management trustee of the Bucks and Montgomery County Schools Health Consortium? Second? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes. Okay. So the next thing is the dates for calendars. July 18th, we have Policy Committee, and we also have a board work session. The 25th of July, we have a board meeting. August 7th, there's an Education Committee meeting. August 9th, there's a Finance Committee meeting. August 15th, there's a board work session. And August 22nd, there's a board meeting. Now on to any old business. I don't have any. Yeah.
I just have a question on the dates for board members' calendars, and I apologize, Scott, for putting you on the spot here. Do we have a date for the property committee to be meeting with Fidavia?
Dave has not floated any dates yet.
Okay, thank you.
Any other old business? Any new business? Paul, I know you had something you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I just take a minute. Dr. Cantona and I had a brief conversation of something I read over the weekend related to Leader in Me program, which talks about the whole child aspect and some of the school districts around us in Pennsylvania that are succeeding with this. And I wanted to not ping it specifically on this program, but I just wanted to give an open-ended question to Dr. Cantona to explain some of the activities that we are doing around the whole child, and particularly what things that we hope to do in the future. Just take a couple minutes.
Okay. As you're aware, the whole child concept and approaching the whole child is a part of the strategic plan that was developed last year. We had begun this year by asking for some brainstorming about different things that we were doing across the district for students in a variety of areas, both in academics and beyond. We talk about mental health, for example, and we asked all of the schools to get teachers to give some input on some of the things that are happening, from counseling and to the regular curriculum, whatever the case might be. We brought those together and recently had the administrators go through looking by a rubric that was developed through information from ASCD, where everything fit in, whether it fit in with safety, whether it fit in with curriculum, whether it fit in with having students engaged on a daily basis, et cetera. They went through and they put these into categories, and then we looked at where are the gaps, where do we need more support. And at this point, we are in the process of prioritizing what those gaps are at the different levels across the district. And as we get into next year, we are going to be looking at how are we going to support or fill in, how are we going to support students in those areas or fill in those gaps. And we will be looking at things, whether it's with, establishing different partnerships that we need to do, whether it is bringing in some aspect of something like Leader in Me, whatever that might be, so that we can make sure that we have even stronger programming than we currently do. But I can tell you that I don't have the items sitting in front of me right now, but I can tell you that there are many, many ways in which we are currently supporting the whole child throughout the district. But again, like anything else, there are a couple places where we absolutely want to go back and make sure that we strengthen. So we will be looking at that. Thank you for, forwarding that. And that's actually something, as I mentioned, that we had seen in ASCD when we pulled together the rubric.
Thank you. Any other new business? The one item I'll bring up is both Angela and I sit on the Education Foundation, and we have a new president there, Jim Beam, who's going to work on some new ideas and try to help increase the amount of money that is brought in by the Education Foundation and really helps us with our budget. There's another source of revenue, unpredictable source of revenue, but a good source of revenue to help us with our budget. So I'm going to be asking him from time to time to come here and share the work that the board's, the Education Foundation's working on, and just to give the public more awareness of it, and also the board. I figured he can do a better job of explaining that than I can, and he can share his passion with all of you. So look forward to that in the future. All right? Now, courtesy of the floor.
It's a long time to sit. I've lived in the Methacton School District for 64 years, and 3 of my children graduated from Methacton.
Ma'am, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Could you just tell us your name? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
What township?
Charlotte Mulder. I live on Farview Avenue in Trooper.
Okay, thank you.
And I worked for Methacton as a teacher aide, and I was president of the Parent-Teacher Council. And I always paid my taxes when they first came due. This is what my issue is. I went to Florida in April of last year and had my mail forwarded. On June 13th, I called Eagleville Post Office to hold my mail because we were going to be coming home. But I still continued to get mail forwarded to Florida. And I called again on June 16th and the 30th, and the manager said he would cancel forwarding in the system. And I got home in July, and the mail was, I wasn't getting any mail, and they said they weren't holding any at the post office. Wait a few more days. And a neighbor in Florida checked my mailbox there, and the mailman, and they didn't have any mail. Then I received emails from my auto insurance company and the bank that my mail was returned to them as undeliverable. I tried to call the Florida post office, but they don't bother answering their phone. And so I got in touch with Consumer Affairs of the post office in Tampa and Philadelphia to investigate. And August 26th, I finally got out of the forwarding machine. That was 2 months of no mail. Can you imagine what your mail would be if you didn't get any for 2 months? I called the utilities and the credit cards and got replacement bills and called the insurance companies, everything I could think of. Then in mid-November, I got a late notice from the school district. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, but it was a shock to me because I never saw one before. And I called Kirsten immediately, the tax collector. I'm sure you all know her name. And she said there was nothing that she could do about it. So I called Philadelphia Consumer Affairs of the post office, and they sent me a letter saying, I apologize that you did not receive your local tax bill and as a result incurred a penalty in the amount of $429.20. As a matter of courtesy, I'm enclosing a copy of this letter for your use in contacting the local tax office in hopes of explaining the cause for the delay in your payment of taxes. Well, I talked to someone in the township, and she suggested I call the high school. I talked to Tom Klaus, the business manager. He said he had no authority to do anything. And then I called Mr. Zerby's office and talked with his secretary, and she talked to him, and he said he had no authority to do anything. So I figure your folks are the only people that have an authority. For what happened to me, I had to pay $429.20 over the August 31st tax amount due. So I think you're the end of the line.
When a tax bill goes delinquent, it's generally, after a certain period of time, turned over to the county from the tax collectors. I don't know what the exact time limitations are, and I don't obviously know the particulars as to your matter, but I would think that that's probably where the matter is at this point. What jurisdiction the county has to reduce penalties and the like, I really don't know. I'd have to check with them. But that's normally where it goes. It goes to tax claim down in Norristown.
Well, could you give me that information then? Because they've finally figured it.
We'll follow up.
Sure, we'll follow up with you and put you in the right contact.
Thank you.
And we'll touch base with Dr. Zerby when he gets back into town as well.
Diana Kernop, co-MEA president. I just wanted to make a few remarks, just as everybody else likes to get up and make them, I guess. One is you commented about PSERS, and every time taxes come up, we talk about PSERS. One of the things I want to say to you and to the public, whether you're in favor of the pension system or not, as long as PSERS has been in existence and the people have been working here, the employees have paid what they have owed in every single paycheck that they have earned. The issue came and created a problem for you, the boards, when the state gave a hiatus in paying PSERS for the school districts and for the state. And what, even myself in looking at it, when I thought hiatus, I thought you weren't paying it and you were just, the money, there was enough money there. The hiatus was, it was a deferred payment. That became like paying two bills at the same time, which has added to your debt. But it's not only your debt, it's we've paid for it too. So when we talk about PSERS, we make it sound like it's something, and it certainly is a positive pension program, but we're paying for it, and we've always paid for it, and we've always contributed. The second thing is we talk about efficiency, and we talk about fat. And that the only thing that really means here is people, because that's really all you can do to get rid of to bring your budget down. You've gotten rid of the cafeteria workers, we've gotten rid of the bus drivers, we've gotten rid of the long-term subs. We pay the long-term subs less than a first-year teacher to do the same job. And through every contract, when student enrollment has gone down, staffing has gone down too. So you don't see the staff being reduced in the same way as eliminating the cafeteria or other groups. And certainly there are things that were probably brought to you in your efficiency studies but the only thing it can mean is more people lost to reduce your budget. And I guess the last thing I'd like to hit is I did look up the principal or the administrative contract. I didn't get all the pages to read. I will get my answer from Dr. Zerby. And then I might publicly say it since I'm not being given the courtesy of that response. In addition, I want to bring up the points committee. Mr. Roth said he'd like a review of the points. In 2005, we negotiated a contract that we agreed to do that. And in good faith, having changed superintendents and we lost business managers, we lost HR people, but we worked steadily at trying to resolve that issue and look at the positions, look at the points, and be able to bring something forward. That job was finished 6 years ago and has sat. So we can currently go back and revisit looking at some of those that people invested, management and MEA invested a significant amount of time in looking at the points and whatever. In addition, certainly anything can be reviewed, but it has been extensively reviewed already. It's just waiting. Some of the positions that might still be there may be placeholders, and they might not be filled currently. There may be recommendations of the committee that have not gone into fruition yet. But it isn't something that has been ignored by either management or the association. It's finished. It just needs to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana.
Hi, Kelly Ames, born and raised in Worcester. I've lived here for over 40 years. I attended Worcester Elementary, Arcola Intermediate, and Methacton Junior and Senior High Schools. Then I went down the road to Ursinus College, and I just finished my 28th year here in the Methacton School District teaching health and physical education. 26 of those years at Arcola. I've coached a variety of sports at a variety of levels for about 25 years. So I guess you could say this is my home. I love the community, I love the district, I love the people that I work with, and I love the students. Dr. Zerby had mentioned last week that all kids are good. That is true, but I believe our students here at Methacton are great. I couldn't stop thinking all week about the topic that was brought up at last week's meeting regarding mental health issues with our students. Anxiety, depression, drug addiction. We have lost too many students over the past 5-6 years due to various mental health issues, and as you know, one is too many. As was brought up last week, we do a lot of good things in this area, from assemblies to forums to surveys, the NOPE program, which, by the way, stands for Narcotics, Overdose, Prevention, and Education. The high school has SAP, a student assistance program. Arcola has the MAPS team. And we also have at Arcola a mental health unit in our 8th grade curriculum, which I know firsthand brings up a lot of issues, and kids share a lot about themselves. But unfortunately, it stops here. 5 years ago, a high school health and PE teacher retired and was not replaced. 4 years ago, a health and PE teacher from the high school retired. She was not replaced. And now this year, we furloughed a health and phys ed teacher from the high school. Instead of replacing teachers, we have taken away from the health and physical education program. I feel we have done a real disservice to our students. 4 years ago, they got 2 semesters of health, which is only every other day, one in 10th grade, which focused on human sexuality and reproduction, one semester in 11th grade that focused on issues such as depression, addiction, and other mental health issues, concerns. Now, students are getting only one semester, which again is only every other day. And they're trying to combine all of this information into one. And this is for their entire 9th through 12th grades at Methacton. This is not enough. You had asked last week, there's Ms. Larceny, about what more can we do? I would love to see us put more health back in the high school curriculum, specifically the mental health unit. Yes, the assemblies we have do make an impact, but 1 to 2 people speaking to 200 to 400 students doesn't have the same effect as a caring teacher presenting this valuable information to 20 to 25 students. A much better ratio and a much better environment where students are more likely to share their issues, concerns, and perhaps we can get them the help they need before it's too late. But again, I don't want PE to suffer any more than it has. As we all know, without health, we really don't have anything. So what more can we do? Let's put a mental health unit back in the high school curriculum. And as I said at the start, I love our students. They truly are great kids. We have a great district, and I would love to see us only get better. I think our students are worth it. I also know that money, especially after tonight's meeting, plays a huge part in the overall plan. However, would you rather save money or a life? Let's give our students more. They deserve it. Thank you.
Very nice job. Very well spoken. Thank you. John?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I'd like to speak to the issue of reassessment of properties at Shannondale. The issue has been in the court probably on the order of 5 years. And I found out at the last Finance Committee meeting that the issue is tied up with the Keystone Realty agreement, which gives that outside corporation that seeks out underassessed properties a 25% of higher taxes that are obtained if Keystone Realty is successful, 25% of the taxes for 3 years in a row. So they get a lot of money. But also, over that same period of time, the Bartle firm has been billing for legal services associated with that court appeal. And I want to bring up the issue that maybe those legal fees should be credited to the amount that Keystone would otherwise get. In other words, if Keystone in 1 year were to get $100,000, but Methacton, through its legal representative, has in that year spent, let's say, $50,000, well, then maybe Keystone should only get $50,000. In other words, do you understand what I'm saying? Possibly it's something that Mr. Bartle could speak to, but I think that, the bottom line is that for 3 years, if an appeal is successful and we get higher taxes, we're not paying just 25% of that extra money to Keystone Realty. We're also paying a big chunk of money to the legal representative. I'm not questioning the performance of the legal representative. I'm questioning whether Keystone should be, the money that goes to Keystone should be reduced by what, because when we signed the deal with Keystone, does it say that Methacton will pay all the legal costs, or is it silent on the issue? So I think that it's a valid issue relative to the efficiency of our system. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi. Just because it's getting so late. My name is Amory McDevitt, and I'm Lower Providence. My question has to do with busing, and from what I'm hearing, maybe you don't attend to that anymore. Is busing not part of the school district's problem?
The door closed. I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my question is on busing in the township. Are you no longer in charge of that? Several comments have been like, well, I realize you probably have an outside agent that does the bus drivers, but are you still in charge of the bus questions? Okay. I have a child that goes to visitation, BVM school, and he's right now in 4th grade. He's 10 years old, and his bus at the beginning of the year was supposed to be at 7:30, and it was then switched to 7 o'clock. So we stood outside each morning at 5 or 10 of 6, or 10 of 7, and he sat on the bus for 55 minutes. I live in Providence Oaks, and I have 9 other families that were also involved with this, and 4 of us took the bus and the rest drove. The only thing we get for paying our school taxes is busing for our children that we choose, I understand, to go to a Catholic school, and I pay for that. However, for a 10-year-old to have to sit on the bus 55 minutes is, I think, a lot. They told us, since they went from 7:30 to 7, that this year we would be looked at and picked up later instead of earlier. I'm here to make sure that that is held. In addition, the principal of our school has decided to open our schools 10 minutes early and close 35 minutes later. So now, instead of school starting at 8, it'll start at 7:50. So I want to make sure that my son does not get picked up before 7 o'clock for those extra 10 minutes, and I'm getting him up almost the same time my high schooler is getting up. So that's my problem.
That information will be passed along.
Okay. Who do I give my email address to?
Yeah. Just send the details to Angela.
Okay.
Yeah, the email address.
Thank you. Yep.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. It was a shame Dr. Zerby wasn't here tonight. He had his spouse surprised him with a vacation where he couldn't make this meeting tonight. And I don't know, you just think about the mechanics or the process what must have happened there with the spouse at home thinking, I'm going to surprise the superintendent of schools with a vacation. Maybe I should look at his schedule or schedule on the board or whatever and look online and things like that. And, you know, there's no business manager. He put the budget together. He's not here. You know, it's hard to think that there was a surprise involved there. It's just me, but you know, he's not here, and I think he should have been here. And I don't know how that went down with the board, but I think he should have been here. Last month I spoke about the elementary language arts program. I thought that the training should have occurred on June 12th because that was a 2-hour delay. The training of the teachers should have occurred on June 12th, but it occurred on Tuesday, May 30th, the day after Labor Day. Memorial Day, yeah, I always mix them up. Memorial Day. So the K through 4 schools were closed for the whole day on May 30th, and the teachers in the K through 4 schools learned about the new elementary art program. I was at a curriculum meeting, and apparently the kits weren't here to have the teachers hold each kit and go through each booklet and things like that. And Dr. Katona said that it would have been better if they had the kits in front of them rather than one person showing the different aspects of the kit. So it seems the kits came in before June 12th, so it would have been better to have the training of the teachers on June 12th and have the K through 4 students receive a full day's class. And, you know, that's just a little, I don't know, planning, you know, or leadership by the superintendent and Dr. Katona and things like that. But I don't know who said, no, we're not going to have it June 12th, and who said we're going to do it on May 30th. I don't know whose decision that was. But it probably would have been better on June 12th since that was like a 2-hour day. The other thing I have is the capital improvement report that came out to the board. It came out April of 2016. I don't think we have an approved bid yet for any project yet concerning that report. And I don't think it's going to happen until the summer of 18 where we're actually working on something, and all this is so important. And so that's like 2 years since we had the report. And the other thing, I think there's going to be debt payments falling off on the debt service, where if you borrow more money, you can have a level debt payment to take care of some of these projects. I think the excess of the fund balance of 7% should be transferred to the capital reserve account, not committed fund balance, because the committed can probably be changed to uncommitted and spent for anything. So you should move that money to the capital reserve account. The PSERS problem, it stemmed from there was an additional 25% put on retirees' annuities, an increase to their monthly annuity check of 25%. You used to get 2% for every year of service, then you got 2.5% for every year of service, and this occurred in the early 2000s. So right away they got 25% more expenditures on their future payments, and this occurred when they were flush with money. And what happened was the stock market crashed, and all their investment earnings went down, and this additional benefit compounded everything. And then plus, in addition to that, the share that the district paid and the state paid was allowed to go down to just 1% of salaries, rather than having a floor of 4% or 5% to protect from the market declining. So they allowed the districts to pay like 1%, it might even go on less than 1%. So all that combined in the early 2000s created this unfunded liability for the PSERS account, and it's put on the backs of the taxpayers. So that's how that came to be. And the budget presentation, thank God there was a statement made that it's an average increase of $130. I didn't hear the amount of the homestead exclusion per parcel, per homestead. I know it's probably in the document, the PDF, but I didn't hear the presentation of that. And I just thought the whole thing was kind of, you know, not real organized. But, I think the board needs to have better documents when they review the budget, and I don't think they should spend a lot of time on the 5-year plan. I think they should dig into the budget of the following year and not be so frightened by those numbers that are out there, because every year we make it happen and we get surpluses. And I'd like to thank Brenda Hackett for her memories on everything that causes the surpluses or doesn't cause the surplus, like not paying a Blue Cross bill or transferring money to the capital reserve, that you don't have the big surplus. So Brenda really has a lot of good history there. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor? Thank you, everybody.